After I finished washing windows on the city's high-rise buildings, my phone rang. "Dad, I got married yesterday," my daughter said. "When we come back from our honeymoon, you'll move into the storage room. My husband needs the master bedroom." That night, I sat alone in the house I had spent 43 years paying off staring at the dark harbor outside, until my neighbor knocked near midnight. The moment she finished speaking, my hands went cold. I forced a smile, thanked her quietly, then walked down to the basement and opened the lockbox my late wife had hidden years earlier. This story is about trust betrayal and fighting back. Before we dive in, I need to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be lying? Just drop a yes or no in the comments. Quick note, some details are fictionalized to strengthen the message. What truly matters is the lesson at the heart of this story. My daughter called me from the airport to tell me she'd married in secret and that I'd be moving into the storage room by the time she returned. My name is Harold Bennett, 68 years old, and for the past 43 years, I've washed windows on the tallest buildings in Charleston, South Carolina. That Thursday morning in July, I was standing at my harbor view window with coffee in hand, watching the early light turn the water bronze when my phone rang. "Dad, I got married yesterday," Evelyn said without preamble. "Preston and I will need the master bedroom when we get back Friday. You can take the storage room in back, you don't need much space anyway." My daughter Evelyn Bennett, 31 years old, with her mother's auburn hair and none of her kindness, spoke with the brisk efficiency of someone dictating terms to hired help. Preston Whitmore, 33. A failing real estate agent with slicked-back hair and calculated charm had married my daughter in secret the day before. I set my coffee cup down carefully on the windowsill, the ceramic clicking against wood. Through the glass, I could see tourists already gathering along East Battery Street, pointing at the historic homes my late wife Nora and I had saved for decades to buy back in 1985. "Congratulations, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's wonderful news. When did you say you'll be home?" "Friday afternoon," Evelyn replied, impatience sharpening her tone. "Just make sure the room is cleared out. Preston's mother is sending furniture Tuesday. Oh, and we'll need to discuss the monthly expenses. You'll contribute to utilities, obviously." She hung up before I could respond. If you're listening to this story, I hope you'll subscribe to hear how it ends. And I should mention up front what I'm about to share is a dramatized account for entertainment purposes. Names and details have been changed. But the lesson, that's real enough. I stood there holding the phone long after she'd disconnected, watching the harbor through my window. 43 years I'd washed windows, so my daughter would never know hunger. 43 years of safety harnesses and squeegees 40 stories up. Chemical cleaner smell clinging to my clothes, rope burns on my palms from the days before modern equipment, and she'd just demoted me to hired help in my own home. The coffee had gone cold, I dumped it in the sink and walked out. Charleston in July is a study in contrasts, genteel historic facades hiding ruthless humidity, sweet jasmine scent masking the marsh smell from the harbor. I walked the 10 blocks to the waterfront on autopilot, my work boots scuffing against centuries-old cobblestones. Sam Rivera found me standing at the edge of the commercial docks, staring at nothing. "You look like a man who just got bad news delivered politely," Sam said. Sam Rivera, 45. A retired Coast Guard officer with sun-weathered skin and watchful eyes, had been my closest friend for 22 years. We'd met when I was cleaning windows at the Federal Building and he was stationed at the Charleston port. He knew me well enough to read silence. "Evelyn got married yesterday," I said. "Secret ceremony. She called from the airport to inform me I'll be relocating to the storage room. They need the master bedroom." Sam was quiet for a long moment, watching a container ship navigate the channel. "Preston Whitmore," he finally asked. "How'd you know?" "Saw them together at the Battery last month." He had that look like a man calculating square footage. Sam turned to face me fully. "Harold, I saw that woman Preston's mother at the courthouse 3 weeks ago. She was asking very specific questions about your block." Something cold settled in my chest. "How specific?" "Property values, tax assessments, who owns what outright versus mortgaged." She had a leather notebook, the expensive kind. Wrote everything down. Sam's jaw tightened. "This wasn't casual curiosity, brother. That was reconnaissance." The pieces assembled themselves with terrible clarity. Marjorie Whitmore, 62, a former bank manager who'd spent 30 years calculating risk and reward. I'd met her exactly twice, both times she'd studied my townhouse with the cool appraisal of an auctioneer estimating value. 3 weeks ago, I repeated slowly, before Evelyn even mentioned Preston was serious. "Before she mentioned him at all, probably," Sam said. "You told me in June you didn't even know she was seeing anyone." The harbor wind picked up, carrying the salt and diesel smell of working boats. A gull cried overhead, sharp and accusatory. I thought about that phone call, Evelyn's tone, not excited about marriage, not nervous about introducing a new husband, just administrative, logistical, like she was executing a plan someone else had drawn up. The storage room, I said quietly. She didn't ask, she informed. And the furniture arrives Tuesday, Sam added. They're not asking permission because they don't think they need it. Harold, what exactly do you own the house outright? I nodded. Nora and I had paid off the mortgage in 2003. The townhouse, the small savings account, the harbor partnership shares we'd inherited from her grandfather that nobody knew about. Then why would they think they could just take over? Sam asked. Unless they're planning to make you think you have no choice. How long had they been planning this? Weeks, months since the day Preston first walked through my door with his commercial real estate smile and questions about the neighborhood's development potential. Sam's words echoed as I walked back toward the townhouse, the historic building suddenly feeling like contested territory. Marjorie Whitmore didn't ask idle questions at courthouses. She was a strategist who'd spent 3 decades managing commercial loan portfolios. If she was involved, this wasn't about a bedroom. This was about ownership. I spent Thursday night sitting in the dark living room watching headlights sweep across the ceiling, thinking about courthouse visits and calculated smiles and the word ownership. When the knock came at dawn, 3 sharp raps against my front door, I knew before I opened it that whatever Clara Mills had to say would make everything worse. Clara Mills, 35. A nurse who lived in the townhouse next door had kind brown eyes that noticed everything, and right now they were filled with fear for me. Mr. Bennett, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at the empty street. Can I come in, please? I stepped aside. She smelled like hospital antiseptic and sleeplessness. In my kitchen with the coffee maker gurgling and the early light barely touching the harbor outside, Clara wrapped both hands around the mug I'd given her and stared into it like she was reading terrible fortunes in the steam. I heard them through the wall, she finally said. Last night, your daughter and her husband, they were in what I guess is going to be their bedroom now, and the walls in these old houses, are thin as promises, I finished. What did you hear, Clara? She took a shaking breath. Your daughter said they need to get rid of you fast before you figure out what the place is worth. Clara's voice dropped even lower. Mr. Bennett, she said, get rid of, those exact words. I set my own coffee down carefully, keeping my hands steady through sheer will. What else? Preston asked how. Your daughter said there are places for people like you, state facilities for elderly people who can't manage alone. She said once you're in one of those places, the house transfers through power of attorney. They laughed about it. The kitchen was silent except for the coffee maker's dying hiss and the distant cry of gulls over the harbor. I thought about Evelyn's voice on the phone, that administrative tone, not a daughter announcing marriage, a project manager outlining logistics. Did they say when I asked? Soon. Preston said his mother already has paperwork ready. Something about a doctor who asks the right questions. Clara's hands trembled around the mug. I'm sorry, I know she's your daughter, but I had to tell you. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand once. You did exactly right, thank you. What are you going to do? Good question. How does a daughter look at the man who raised her alone and see only an obstacle to liquidate? When did I stop being her father and become inventory? I stood and refilled both our mugs, buying time to think. I'm going to need you to keep listening, I said finally. Anything else you hear, times, names, specific plans, write it down, dates and exact words if you can. But Clara, stay safe. Don't let them know you're paying attention. You're not going to confront them. Not yet. I returned to my chair, feeling something cold and tactical settle into place where shock had been. Right now, they think I'm a confused old man who washes windows for pocket change. They think I'll be easy to move, easy to convince I need help, easy to put away. But you're not, Clara said slowly, reading my face. No, I agreed, I'm not. After she left, I stood at the sink, washing our mugs with dish soap that smelled like fake lemons, staring out at the harbor. The morning light was full now, turning the water from bronze to blue. Sailboats dotted the channel. Tourists would be flooding the battery in another hour, taking pictures of these historic homes they'd never be able to afford. This townhouse was worth more than Evelyn could possibly know. The location alone right on the harbor, but there were other things too. Things Nora had inherited. Things we'd never advertised. Nora. The memory hit me with physical force 5 years ago in the hospice room that smelled of disinfectant and approaching death. My wife had gripped my hand with surprising strength. If Evelyn ever comes for the house, she'd whispered, everything you need is in the basement. I've prepared for this, Harold. I've documented everything. I'd thought it was the morphine talking. Nora had always seen the best in people, especially our daughter. Why would she prepare for betrayal? But Nora had been a school teacher who'd grown up in a family that understood how money and property could turn children into vultures. She'd watched her own siblings fight over her parents' estate like dogs over meat. She'd learned young that family and greed could occupy the same space. She'd prepared for this war before I even knew it was coming. The basement door stuck the way it always did, swollen with decades of Charleston humidity. I had to put my shoulder into it. The stairs creaked under my weight, old wood but solid. I'd reinforced them myself back in the 90s. The basement smelled of mildew and dust and old paint. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, throwing everything into harsh light and shadow. Boxes of Christmas decorations. Nora's teaching supplies never thrown away. My old window washing equipment from before the company upgraded to modern gear. And in the back corner behind 3 rusted paint cans and a stack of drop cloths exactly where she'd told me, a metal lockbox covered in dust. I pulled it out carefully. It was heavier than I expected, not just papers then. The metal was cold against my palms despite the basement's thick heat. No visible lock, just a keyhole on the front. Nora's charm bracelet was still in my dresser drawer upstairs where I'd kept it since her funeral, too painful to look at but too precious to put away. I'd never noticed if any of the charms were actually keys. I carried the box upstairs, my heart beating harder than it had when Sam told me about Marjorie's courthouse visit. This felt different. This felt like Nora reaching across 5 years of death to hand me a weapon. The bracelet lay coiled in the drawer like a silver snake. Tiny charms, a schoolhouse for her career, a book for her love of reading, a sailboat for our harbor. And there, smaller than the others, a key. It fit the lockbox perfectly. As I lifted the lid, something shifted heavily inside papers I hoped, or evidence, or salvation. The key turned with a click that felt like a lock opening on 5 years of grief. Inside the metal box, arranged with the careful precision of a teacher who'd spent her life organizing lesson plans, were 3 items: a sealed envelope with my name in Nora's handwriting, a notarized property deed, and a CD labeled Estate Attorney Copy Ashford and Associates. I opened the envelope first. The paper felt expensive, heavy stock that Nora had insisted we use for important documents. Harold, if you're reading this, our daughter has finally made her move. Everything you need to protect yourself is here. The deed proves sole ownership. The trust structure Desmond helped me build is impenetrable. Evelyn cannot touch it. But she will try. She's been asking about the property value since she was 25. I've documented every conversation. The CD has recordings, dates, legal protection. Don't let her guilt you. Don't let her manipulate you. You raised her with love, but I saw what she became. I'm sorry I won't be there to help you fight, but I made sure you'd have weapons. All my love, always, Nora. I had to read it twice through the burning in my eyes. 25. Evelyn had been circling this property for 6 years before Nora died. My wife had known, had prepared, had left me this arsenal, and I'd been too grief-stricken to remember her final warning until Clara knocked on my door. Clara. I found her in her front garden Saturday afternoon, deadheading roses that grew along the fence between our properties. The smell of fertilizer and Charleston's summer heat hung thick in the air. I need your help, I said quietly, and it might be dangerous. She looked at me for a long moment, then set down her pruning shears. Tell me what you need. 2 hours later, she had a voice-activated recorder tucked into the decorative molding in the hallway between our townhouses. The walls in these historic buildings were original plaster over brick, beautiful, but you could hear conversations through them if someone spoke loudly enough. We didn't have to wait long. Evelyn arrived unannounced that afternoon, her heels clicking against the hardwood in what used to be the master bedroom. Within minutes, her voice carried clearly through Clara's recorder. Preston, he's just an old window washer, Evelyn said, her tone cold and businesslike. The judge will believe dementia when we present the medical report. Dr. Monroe already agreed to the evaluation. A pause. She was on the phone. Once he's in Sunset Acres, the power of attorney kicks in. The property sells, we split with your mother, everyone wins. Well, everyone who matters. Another pause. Then laughter, my daughter's laughter, bright and cruel. No, he won't fight it. He doesn't even know what the place is worth. He thinks it's just some old house. Preston will be millionaires by October. Clara knocked on my door 20 minutes after Evelyn left, her face pale, holding the recorder like it burned her hand. I got every word, she whispered. I stood in that hallway listening to the playback, hearing my daughter describe me like I was a problem to be solved, an asset to be liquidated. When did I stop being her father? When did I become inventory? Desmond Ashford, 70 years old, an estate attorney with silver hair and immaculate 3-piece suits, had handled my late wife's affairs for 3 decades and knew every page of our estate documents by heart. His office on Broad Street smelled like old law books and the coffee he imported from somewhere expensive. Monday morning, I spread everything across his mahogany desk. Nora's letter, the deed, Clara's recording. He listened to the audio twice, his expression growing colder each time. Harold, your wife was brilliant. he said finally. This trust structure is impenetrable. The property is in your name alone, protected by an irrevocable trust that Evelyn cannot contest. She has zero legal claim, but there's something you need to know. I felt my chest tighten. She's already filed something, hasn't she? Desmond pulled a folder from his desk drawer, the kind lawyers use for active cases. Power of attorney, request County Clerk's Office, July 8th. She claimed you're mentally incompetent and need immediate guardianship. Listed herself as primary caretaker and sole heir. He looked at me over his reading glasses. It's completely fraudulent. I blocked it immediately through our estate monitoring service. But Harold, she'll try again with medical backing. July 8th, 3 weeks before she called me from the airport. 3 weeks before the secret wedding announcement. She filed that before she even told me about Preston, I said slowly. Desmond nodded. This wasn't impulsive, this was coordinated. Someone coached her through the preliminary paperwork, someone who knows estate law and how to challenge competency. He tapped the folder. The filing listed a consultation with Marjorie Whitmore as reference for your alleged mental state. Preston's mother was involved from the start. The office was silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the bookshelf. I thought about Marjorie at the courthouse asking about property values. I thought about Preston's calculated charm. I thought about my daughter practicing the words cognitive decline without flinching. How long had they been coaching her? How many times had she rehearsed this performance? What else, I asked. What else has she done that I don't know about? Desmond reached into his file cabinet and pulled out a glossy brochure. Sunset Acres Memory Care Facility. The photos showed a grim concrete building with barred windows. At the bottom, in small print, state-subsidized long-term care. This was attached to her power of attorney filing, Desmond said quietly. Required documentation showing planned placement facility. I took the brochure. The paper felt cheap, the photos deliberately misleading. I flipped to the inquiry form stapled to the back. Evelyn's signature, dated July 6th, 2 days before she filed the guardianship paperwork. A week before I even knew Preston existed. She'd already picked out my cage. I left Desmond's office carrying that brochure like evidence at a crime scene, which I suppose it was. The Charleston heat hit me the moment I stepped outside thick August humidity that made my shirt stick to my back. I needed to think, needed to move, so I walked the 12 blocks to the harbor where I'd always done my clearest thinking. Sam Rivera grabbed my arm before I even reached the docks, his voice low and urgent. Harold, don't look now, but the man in the gray jacket has been photographing you for 3 days straight. I felt my spine go rigid. Where? By the fish market, pretending to look at his phone. But that's a telephoto lens, brother. Professional grade. Sam's grip tightened. I noticed him Monday following you from the attorney's office. Yesterday he was outside your townhouse at dawn. Today he's been tracking you since you left home. Victor Ames, 48. A private investigator with cold gray eyes and a reputation for crossing ethical lines had been shadowing me for 3 days with a telephoto lens. I saw him now, gray jacket, camera bag, the studied casualness of someone who made a living being invisible. Let me guess, I said quietly. He's been getting shots of me looking confused, pausing to check addresses, squinting at street signs. Sam's expression went dark. I ran his plates Tuesday night. Victor Ames, private investigator, lost his license in Georgia for evidence tampering 2 years ago. Moved to South Carolina, works under the table for anyone with cash and no conscience. The pieces assembled with sickening clarity. The staged photographs, the fraudulent power of attorney filing the nursing home brochure. They weren't just planning to take my house. They were building a legal case to declare me incompetent, to strip away my rights, to lock me in that concrete facility with barred windows while they liquidated everything Nora and I had built. They're manufacturing evidence, I said, for 3 days minimum, maybe longer. Sam pulled out his phone. But 2 can play that game. I've been photographing him, photographing you. Time-stamped, geotagged, the whole package. We document the harassment, we've got proof of conspiracy. How long had Ames been following me? How many photographs existed of me pausing to check addresses, squinting at street signs in the bright sun, looking to anyone who didn't know better? Lost and confused. They were hunting me with a camera, building a false narrative, one staged shot at a time. The smell of salt water and fish guts hung heavy over the docks. A cargo ship's horn sounded in the channel, deep and mournful. I thought about Evelyn somewhere on her honeymoon, probably celebrating the successful execution of Phase 1 while I stood here realizing I'd been under surveillance for days. We need to inventory everything in Nora's box, I said. All of it. If they're this far along with their scheme, I need to know every weapon my wife left me. Back in my basement with the door locked and Sam keeping watch, I spread the contents of Nora's lockbox across the concrete floor under the harsh light of the bare bulb. The property deed I'd already seen, the CD with attorney copies. But there were other documents I'd missed in my initial shock documents, wrapped in waterproof plastic, preserved with the care of someone who knew they'd matter someday. Charleston Harbor Partnership shares. Original certificates, the paper yellowed and brittle, dated 1887. Sam picked one up carefully, his hands reverent. Harold, do you understand what these are? Charleston Harbor rights weren't just about docking fees in 1887. These partnerships controlled shipping access, warehouse space, commercial development. He pulled out his phone, searching. Some of these old partnerships are still paying dividends. Some are worth... He stopped staring at his screen. What? They're worth $500,000, current market value according to the South Carolina Historical Maritime Assets Registry. Sam looked up at me. Your wife hid $500,000 in the basement. I found the appraisal document at the bottom of the stack, dated 6 months before Nora died. Professional letterhead, notarized, signature, detailed breakdown of the partnership's modern value based on Charleston Harbor's commercial real estate boom. Nora had known exactly what she was protecting. The final envelope was sealed with red wax, Nora's old-fashioned touch. My name across the front in her careful teacher's handwriting. Inside, 3 pages of lined paper filled with her precise script. My darling Harold, if you're reading this, our daughter has finally done what I always feared. She will come with a man's family behind her, people who see only money where we built a life. Don't let them take it. Don't let guilt or love or obligation make you surrender what we protected together. My hands shook holding the paper. The basement felt cold despite the August heat pressing through the old stone walls. The harbor shares are your insurance. The deed is your fortress. But remember, Evelyn learned cruelty from someone. She wasn't born cold. She was taught. My wife had known. 5 years ago, dying in that hospital bed, Nora had seen the future clearly enough to hide ammunition for a war I didn't know was coming. She'd loved me enough to prepare for our daughter's betrayal. I read the final paragraph out loud, my voice rough. Preston's mother, Marjorie Whitmore, came to our door twice when Evelyn was in college, asking about the property value. I sent her away both times. She's been waiting 20 years for another chance. Don't let her have it. I see you. Sam let out a low whistle. 20 years. Harold, this isn't about Preston and Evelyn. This is about Marjorie. She's been circling your property since before Preston even met your daughter. 20 years ago, Marjorie had knocked on our door with questions about East Battery Street real estate values. Nora had sent her away. And now 2 decades later, she'd found another route in through my daughter's greed and a son desperate enough to marry for his mother's approval. They thought I was prey. They didn't know Nora had armed me for war. 20 years. Marjorie Whitmore had been circling my property since before Evelyn graduated college, waiting for weakness, waiting for opportunity. Nora had seen it coming, and I'd been too grief-stricken after her death to remember the warning. But now I knew. Now I could prepare. I called them both at 5 in the morning. Sam and Clara arrived at my kitchen table by dawn, and we spread everything across the surface like generals planning a war. Nora's documents, the harbor shares with their $500,000 appraisal, Clara's voice recordings of Evelyn discussing the institutionalization scheme, Desmond Ashford's legal files showing the fraudulent power of attorney attempt, the Sunset Acres brochure with Evelyn's signature, Sam's photographs of Victor Ames stalking me with his telephoto lens. The evidence covered my entire kitchen table. Clara poured coffee from the pot. I'd started the smell of it mixing with the salt air coming through the open window. Dawn light was just touching the harbor, turning the water from black to gray to gold. In the distance, a container ship's horn sounded deep resonant, the sound of commerce moving on schedule regardless of human drama. Talk me through it, Sam said, wrapping his hands around a mug. Every piece. What do we have? What do we need? And what's our play? I started with Nora's letter, reading portions aloud. Clara's eyes filled when I reached the part about Evelyn learning cruelty from someone. Your wife knew, she whispered. She knew, and she armed you anyway. That's love. She left me the property deed in my name alone, protected by an irrevocable trust. The harbor shares are documented inheritance, completely legal, completely mine. Desmond says Evelyn has zero legitimate claim to any of it. But she's filed paperwork anyway, Sam pointed out. Fraudulent paperwork. Power of attorney claiming I'm incompetent. Desmond caught it and blocked it, but she'll try again. I tapped Clara's recording device, this time with medical documentation and staged photographs. Clara picked up the Sunset Acres brochure, her nurse's training evident in the way she immediately spotted the red flags. 1-star facility, 3 abuse violations. This isn't about your care. This is about getting you out of the way as cheaply as possible while they liquidate assets. That's exactly what it is. I agreed. But here's the question. Do we confront them now with what we know, or do we let them commit further to the fraud? Sam leaned back thinking. The chair creaked under his weight. Ashford would say document everything. Let them dig the hole deeper. That's what he said. Let them file the fake medical report. Let them present the staged photographs to a judge. Let them perjure themselves on record. Then we produce the real evidence, Clara's recordings, our counter-surveillance of Ames, the proof that they knew I was competent but chose to lie about it anyway. Clara's hands tightened around her mug. That's asking you to wait while they call you incompetent, while they try to strip away your rights. Harold, can you do that? Can you let them think they're winning? I thought about 43 years washing windows, about holding on when the wind tried to tear you off a building 40 stories up, about the discipline it took to move slowly, carefully, trusting your equipment and your training, even when every instinct screamed to panic. I can wait, I said, if waiting means they destroy themselves completely. We were building a fortress brick by brick. Every recording, every document, every witness statement was mortar that would seal them inside their own lies when the walls finally closed. Sam pulled out a notepad, actual paper, old school. Then we need assignments, tactical roles. Clara continues recording, I said. Anything she can capture through the walls, especially if Marjorie comes to the house. I can install a second recorder in the hallway, Clara offered. Voice-activated, time-stamped, completely legal in South Carolina, single-party consent for recording in your own home. Sam, you keep documenting Victor Ames. Every time he follows me, every photograph he takes, you photograph him doing it. Build a harassment case. Already on it. I've got 3 days of solid surveillance documentation. When this goes to court, we'll prove systematic stalking. I'll call Otis Greer Monday morning about changing the locks. They don't get keys to this house. I looked at the list growing on Sam's notepad. And I need to visit Martha Doyle at the bank, make sure my accounts are flagged against fraudulent access attempts. What about you? Clara asked quietly. What's your role in all this? I play the part they expect. Confused, weak, compliant, an easy target. I felt something cold settle in my chest. When Evelyn comes with her paperwork and her schemes, I'll be exactly what she thinks. I am, a harmless old man who doesn't understand what's happening, right up until the moment I prove otherwise. The sun was fully up now, pouring through the harbor-facing windows, turning my kitchen golden. I looked at Sam and Clara across the table, these two people who owed me nothing but were risking everything to help me. My daughter wanted to put me in a cage. These strangers were handing me the keys to my freedom. Thank you, I said, and the words felt inadequate. Both of you. You didn't have to. Yes, we did, Clara interrupted firmly. What they're doing is elder abuse. It's evil. And I'm a nurse. I've seen what happens when families treat elderly people like inconvenient inventory. Someone has to stand up. You stood up for me for 22 years, Sam added. When I got out of the Coast Guard with nothing, you gave me work connections. You helped me find my house. You were at my mother's funeral when my own siblings didn't show. He met my eyes. This isn't charity, brother. This is family. My phone buzzed on the kitchen table, jarring in the quiet moment. Evelyn's name lit up the screen. Text message. Dad coming to Charleston next Tuesday. We need to discuss your living arrangements and get some paperwork signed. Bringing Mother Whitmore. She's very concerned about your well-being. Please be home at 2 p.m. Sam read it over my shoulder. His smile was cold and satisfied. She's bringing the puppet master. Perfect. The days between Saturday's war council and Tuesday afternoon crawled by with the strange slowness that comes before battle. I changed the locks Monday morning, secured my bank accounts, rehearsed my confused old man performance in the mirror until I could make my hands tremble on command. Sam and Clara checked in hourly. Everything was ready. Tuesday at precisely 2 o'clock. 3 sharp knocks echoed through my townhouse. And when I opened the door, I finally met the woman Nora had warned me about 20 years too late. Marjorie Whitmore. 62 years old with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and ice blue eyes that calculated value in everything they touched, stood in my doorway radiating the entitled command of someone who'd spent 30 years as a bank manager and never stopped foreclosing. She wore a cream pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly income pearls at her throat, and an expression that said she'd already inventoried every item in my home and determined what each was worth. Harold, she said, not asked. A statement, an acknowledgement of inventory. Behind her stood Evelyn and Preston, my daughter looking nervous, her husband looking like a man who'd made a deal with the devil and was just now reading the fine print. Evelyn, sweetheart, I said, fumbling the door handle slightly. You didn't say you were bringing... I'm sorry, I don't think we've properly met. Marjorie Whitmore, Preston's mother. She swept past me into my entrance hall without waiting for invitation, her expensive perfume, something floral and aggressive, filling the space. "We have quite a lot to discuss, Harold. Where should we sit?" She didn't wait for an answer. She walked straight through to my living room, Evelyn and Preston trailing behind like courtiers following a queen. I heard the soft click from Clara's wall, her recorder activating. "Showtime!" "The living room is fine," I said to their backs, shuffling after them with the gait I'd practiced. "Can I get anyone coffee or tea? I think I have tea somewhere." "We're fine, Dad," Evelyn said quickly. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Marjorie for approval. Marjorie stood in the center of my living room, turning slowly, her gaze sweeping across Nora's antique sideboard, the harbor view windows, the crown molding we'd carefully restored in 1987. "The bones are excellent," she said to Evelyn. "Original hardwood, these ceilings the windows. With proper staging, this could sell for Preston. Fetch the tape measure from the car. We need dimensions for the master bedroom." Preston hesitated at the door. "Mother, shouldn't we discuss—" "The tape measure, Preston." He left. Marjorie pulled out her phone, opening what looked like a notes app. "Now, Harold, Evelyn tells me you've been having some memory difficulties. Confusion about dates, trouble managing finances. We're here to help." "That's very kind," I said, lowering myself carefully into my chair. "I do get confused sometimes. What day is today? Tuesday?" "Yes, Tuesday." Marjorie's smile was sharp as glass. "And we need to discuss your living arrangements. This house is far too much for you to manage alone. The stairs, the maintenance, the property taxes." "Nora always handled the taxes," I said, letting my voice waver. "I'm not sure. Where did she keep those files?" Evelyn and Marjorie exchanged a look. Victory prematurely claimed. Preston returned with a metal tape measure, and I watched them move through my home like prospective buyers at an open house. Marjorie directed Evelyn to measure the master bedroom. They discussed what furniture to keep, what to discard, whether buyers would prefer the antique sideboard or modern staging. They spoke about me in third person while I sat 15 feet away. "Do you think we should keep the antique sideboard, or will buyers prefer modern staging?" Evelyn asked. "Modern," Marjorie said definitively. "We'll have an estate sale for the furniture. Most of it's outdated anyway." I watched my daughter nod obediently at Marjorie's commands, measuring my bedroom like undertakers measuring a coffin. When had Evelyn stopped being her own person? Or had Marjorie been pulling these strings since before the wedding, since college, as Nora's letter suggested? "Now, Harold," Marjorie said, settling onto my couch like a judge taking the bench. "Let's talk about the facility. We found a lovely place called Sunset Acres. Very affordable, very appropriate for your needs." "A facility?" I let confusion cloud my face. "I don't understand. This is my home." "Was your home," Marjorie corrected gently, the way you'd correct a child. "But you can't manage it anymore, can you? The property will sell. We're estimating $200,000, which will cover your care facility fees and leave enough to help Evelyn and Preston start their life together." $200,000 for a historic Charleston townhouse on East Battery Street worth over $2 million. They weren't just stealing from me. They were confident I was too confused to know the difference. Preston cleared his throat. "Mother, shouldn't we have an actual appraisal before—" "Preston, please." Marjorie's voice could have frozen water. "The adults are talking." He fell silent, but I caught the flicker of something in his expression. Doubt, maybe. Or fear. He'd married into this family, but he was learning, as I was, that Marjorie Whitmore didn't have family. She had assets and liabilities. "When would I move?" I asked, playing my part. "To this facility." "Soon," Marjorie said. "Very soon. We have paperwork for you to sign today, just temporary arrangements while we finalize everything. Dr. Monroe will be visiting later this week to do a quick health evaluation. Nothing to worry about." Dr. Monroe. The corrupt physician Clara had heard about on her recordings. The pieces were assembling exactly as we'd predicted. They thought I was prey, confused and weak, ready to be caged. They didn't know I was documenting every word, every gesture, every arrogant assumption. Predators grow careless when they think the kill is guaranteed. Marjorie reached into her designer handbag, leather expensive, probably Italian, and pulled out a glossy business card, pressing it into my hand. Her fingers were cold, her grip firm. "Sunset Acres Memory Care. Harold, I toured it myself last week. They have a room ready for you, single occupancy, very affordable. We'll have you settled there by month's end." The card felt heavy in my trembling hand. Behind Marjorie through the wall, I heard the faint click of Clara's recorder capturing every syllable. The business card Marjorie pressed into my hand that Tuesday sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days, like evidence at a crime scene. Thursday morning, my phone chimed with a calendar reminder I hadn't created. Cognitive assessment, Dr. E. Monroe, 10 a.m. Marjorie had synced her schedule to my phone somehow. The invasion was complete. The appointment appeared on my screen as if I'd agreed to it, but what Marjorie didn't know was that I'd sewn a voice recorder into the inner pocket of my jacket that morning. Sam had helped me test it. Crystal clear audio, 8-hour battery life, impossible to spot unless you knew where to look. Dr. Ellis Monroe, 56. A physician with nervous hands and evasive eyes who checked his phone obsessively had agreed to examine me at Marjorie's request, and I suspected for Marjorie's money. His clinic smelled of antiseptic and something else underneath something stale and desperate. The kind of practice that took walk-ins and cash payments and didn't ask too many questions. He sat across from me in an examination room with thin walls and fluorescent lights that hummed like dying insects. "Now, Harold," he said, speaking too loudly as if volume could compensate for cognitive decline. "Can you tell me what year it is? Take your time, no rush." I let confusion cloud my face, letting my gaze drift to the window. "Is it 1985? "No, wait, that's when we bought the house." I rubbed my forehead. "When did Nora pass? I'm sorry, doctor, my mind gets foggy sometimes." Monroe scribbled notes with quick, furtive movements. His pen scratched across the paper like a confession being written. "And can you tell me who the current president is?" "Reagan," I said, then corrected myself. "No, that's not right. I'm sorry. I watch the news, but I can't seem to hold on to it anymore." More scribbling, more evidence of my supposed decline manufactured through leading questions and my willing performance. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I fumbled deliberately at 86, lost track at 72. He asked me to recall 3 words he'd told me at the start apple table penny. I remembered only one, apologizing for my failing memory. How much had Marjorie paid him? What does it cost to buy a doctor's ethics to purchase a medical license's worth of lies? I'd spent 43 years washing windows honestly, and here was a physician selling fraudulent diagnoses like they were prescriptions for aspirin. Monroe's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "Excuse me one moment, Harold. I need to take this call." He stepped into the adjacent office, closing the door most of the way, but not completely. Through the gap, through those thin walls that Charleston contractors had built a century ago, with more hope than soundproofing, I heard every word. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore, I have him here now. The assessment is going exactly as expected. Yes, I can have the competency report ready by Friday. Severe cognitive decline recommendation for immediate supervised care facility placement, just as we discussed." A pause. I heard the smile in his voice. "The fee we agreed upon will be fine. Half, now half, when the report's filed with the court." No, he has no idea. He's quite confused, exactly as you described. My jacket pocket recorded every syllable. Monroe hung up and returned his professional mask back in place. "Sorry about that, Harold. Now, let's continue." By the time I left his office 40 minutes later, I had a complete recording of his fraud, from leading questions to the phone call plotting with Marjorie. Another brick in the fortress. Another nail in their coffin. That afternoon, I returned home to find Preston's car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw him and Evelyn in the living room with measuring tape and paint samples already redecorating in their minds. I walked in through the back door, heading for the basement where I kept my window washing equipment. I needed to feel the familiar tools, remember who I really was beneath the confused old man mask. Lily Whitmore, 13 years old with blonde braids and quiet, watchful eyes, was already there. Preston's daughter from a previous marriage, the only Whitmore who still looked at me like I was a person instead of a problem to solve. She stood in front of an old photograph I'd framed years ago and forgotten Nora and me in 1985, young and proud at Charleston Harbor, holding up the original partnership shares deed the day her great-grandfather's estate was settled. "Mr. Bennett," Lily's voice was small in the concrete space. "Is this you when you were young?" "That's me, sweetheart, and that's my late wife, Nora." "What's that paper you're holding?" I moved closer, looking at our younger selves, Nora's smile, my arm around her waist, the deed held up like a trophy. "That's the deed to our harbor partnership shares. From the day Nora's great-grandfather left them to us. Very valuable, very important to our family." Lily studied the photograph with a child's intensity, then looked up at me with troubled eyes. "But Grandma Marjorie says you're just the window washer who lives here. She says you don't really own anything. She says you're confused." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She calls you the obstacle when she talks to Daddy. She says you just think you own things, but you don't." I looked at Lily's 8-year-old face, confusion and concern written there in equal measure. She was searching for truth in a world where the adults around her dealt only in lies. The only Whitmore who still had a conscience. I wouldn't let Marjorie corrupt that too. "Lily," I started, but she wasn't finished. She held the photograph carefully in both hands, studying our young faces, the official deed clearly visible in the frame. "This picture says you own important things. Documents don't lie, right? That's what my teacher says. She looked up at me and her next words were barely audible. Grandma Marjorie says you don't really own this house. She says you're confused and you just think you do. But this picture says you own important things. Who's lying, Mr. Bennett, you or Grandma? The child's innocence had become a weapon I hadn't expected. I looked at Lily's confused 8-year-old face and made a decision. She'd been poisoned with enough lies. I wouldn't add to them, but I wouldn't burden her with the ugly truth either. Not yet. That's a very smart question, sweetheart, I said gently. And you're right, documents don't lie. But sometimes adults make mistakes about what they think they know. I promise you'll understand everything soon. It wasn't an answer, but it was honest. Lily nodded slowly, still holding the photograph of young Harold and Nora like it was evidence in a trial, which I supposed it would be. 3 days later, Victor Ames was following me again on King Street, his telephoto camera barely concealed in a canvas bag, and this time I didn't pretend not to notice. I smiled directly at his lens and walked straight toward the Charleston police station 3 blocks away. I'd called ahead. Sam was waiting on the station steps, and I could see him alerting someone inside as I approached. Ames hung back suddenly, uncertain, probably sensing the trap too late. For 2 weeks, Victor Ames had been the hunter photographing his prey from careful distances, building his false narrative of confusion and decline. Today, I'd led him into a trap so obvious he never saw it coming. "Mr. Bennett!" Sam greeted me loudly enough for Ames to hear. "Officer Hale is ready to take your statement about the harassment." Ames stopped walking. I turned, looked directly at him, and raised my voice. "Excuse me, sir, but you've been following me for 2 weeks now. Multiple locations, different times of day, always with that camera. I'm filing a formal complaint with the police. Would you like to come inside and explain yourself?" His face went pale. He turned, walking quickly in the opposite direction. "That's him," I said to Sam. "Get a photo." Sam's phone was already up, capturing clear images of Ames retreating his camera bag, visible his license plate as he reached his car 2 blocks away. Inside the station, Officer Grant Hale, 42, a Charleston patrolman with a steady voice and methodical notepad, listened to my stalking complaint with the careful attention of someone who'd seen elder exploitation before and didn't like it. "Please describe the surveillance pattern," Hale said, pen poised. "Dates, times, locations, everything you can remember." I pulled out my own documentation, dates and locations where Sam had photographed Ames photographing me. 2 weeks of systematic stalking, time-stamped and geotagged. This man, Victor Ames, lost his private investigator license in Georgia for evidence tampering, I explained. He's been hired to manufacture photographic evidence that I'm cognitively impaired. Staged shots of me appearing confused or lost. It's part of a coordinated scheme to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized so my daughter and her in-laws can seize my property. Hale's expression hardened. "You have documentation of this scheme?" "Extensive documentation, officer. Audio recordings, fraudulent medical reports, witness statements. But first, I needed to document the harassment officially, create a police record that Victor Ames was stalking me on someone's orders." Hale wrote steadily for 20 minutes, taking down every detail. When he finished, he looked up. "Mr. Bennett, you don't sound confused to me. You sound like someone building a very thorough legal case. 43 years washing windows, officer. You learn to document every detail when your safety depends on it." Sam leaned in as we left the station 30 minutes later, official police report in hand. "He's running," Sam said with satisfaction. "Ames just texted someone frantically, probably Marjorie. They just lost their spy, and now there's a police record connecting him to harassment and conspiracy to manufacture evidence." The predator had become the documented criminal, and his camera was now evidence of conspiracy. That evening, back in my townhouse basement, Sam and I spread the complete arsenal across the concrete floor, like generals reviewing battle plans before the final assault. Every piece of evidence, every weapon Nora had left me, and every weapon we'd built together over these brutal weeks. The property deed sole ownership in my name, protected by Nora's irrevocable trust. The Charleston Harbor Partnership shares original certificates from 1887, appraised at $500,000. Clara's audio recordings of Evelyn discussing the institutionalization scheme, planning my imprisonment with cold calculation. My jacket pocket recording of Dr. Monroe promising Marjorie fraudulent documentation selling his medical license for cash. The police report on Victor Ames' official law enforcement acknowledgement of the stalking conspiracy. Bank statements from Martha Doyle proving my financial competence, every account properly managed, every transaction documented. Nora's prophetic letter warning me about Marjorie's 20-year scheme. The photograph Lily had found young Harold and Nora with their partnership deed, proof of ownership that a child could understand. "Property worth $2.3 million, Sam said, looking at the appraisal documents. "Recordings of conspiracy, documented fraud, police evidence of harassment. You could end this tomorrow, Harold. Walk into court, lay all this out, destroy them before they know what hit them." "Not yet." "Why the hell not?" Because Ashford says we need them to file the fake power of attorney with Monroe's fraudulent medical report attached. Right now, it's attempted fraud. Once they file it with the court, once they sign their names to perjure documents and present false medical evidence to a judge, then it's felony fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse. Criminal charges, not just civil penalties. Sam wanted justice now, swift, immediate, satisfying. But I'd learned patience in 43 years of washing windows. The best view comes after the climb. And Marjorie Whitmore hadn't reached the top yet. When she did, when she thought she'd finally won, that's when she'd discover there was no floor beneath her feet. Sam studied the evidence spread across my basement floor, every piece of a trap that had taken weeks to build. "When do we spring it?" he asked quietly. I placed Nora's letter on top of the pile, her handwriting still steady after 5 years in that lockbox. "When they think they've already won. When Marjorie walks into that courthouse believing I'm too confused to stop her, when she files that fraudulent paperwork thinking victory is one signature away. That's when we teach her what it costs to underestimate a window washer." Marjorie didn't know she was walking into a trap. None of them did. And the hardest part of waiting wasn't the patience. It was watching my daughter execute the cruelty her mother-in-law had taught her, knowing I'd have to let it happen until the moment was exactly right. Evelyn arrived at my door on Friday morning with 10 flattened cardboard boxes under her arm and the kind of smile people wear when they're about to hurt you and want you to know they're enjoying it. "Dad, we need to get the bedroom cleared today," she announced, not asked. She swept past me into the master bedroom Nora and I had shared for 38 years, dropping the boxes on the floor with a hollow thud. "The buyers are touring Wednesday. Professional staging starts Monday. You need to be in the storage room by tonight." Preston followed her in carrying packing tape and a marker. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "But sweetheart," I said, letting my voice waver, This is my room. Nora and I picked out this furniture together. Where will I sleep?" "The storage room," Evelyn said, already opening my dresser drawers, pulling out folded shirts without ceremony. "I told you, it has a cot. You don't need much space anymore. Stop being difficult and start packing." I watched my daughter handle my belongings like they were garage sale inventory. When had she learned this coldness? Or had Marjorie simply given her permission to reveal what was always there? "Okay," I said quietly. "I'll pack. Could you hand me those boxes?" Evelyn assembled one, shoved it toward me. "Clothes first, then the closet. I want this room completely empty by 6 tonight." Through the wall, so faint only I would recognize it, I heard Clara's recorder click on, every word being documented, every moment of this performance being captured for the moment when the trap finally closed. I began to pack, methodically, carefully, folding each shirt with hospital corners the way Nora had taught me, organizing by category: work clothes, casual wear, formal shirts for the rare occasions I needed them. I labeled each box clearly in steady handwriting: clothing dresser, clothing closet, personal items. Evelyn watched me pack for 20 minutes before I heard her frustration build. "Dad, just throw them in. You don't need to be so precise. It's not like you're moving across the country, you're moving to the back room." "I want to know where everything is," I said, not looking up, "so I don't get confused." But my hands were steady, my movements precise. I was packing 43 years of life into cardboard boxes, and I was doing it with the methodical care of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I folded my shirts and placed them in boxes my daughter had brought to evict me from my own bedroom. Each fold was precise, deliberate. When had she learned to look at me with such cold calculation? When had I stopped being her father and become merely an obstacle with a heartbeat? "Evelyn," Preston said quietly from the doorway, "can I talk to you for a minute?" "I'm supervising. He needs supervision." "In the hallway, please." She sighed, irritated, but followed him out. They stood just beyond the bedroom door, voices low but not low enough. "Why isn't he fighting this?" Evelyn hissed. "He should be crying, confused, breaking down. He's just doing it like it's a normal request. Something's wrong." "Maybe," Preston said slowly, because he understands perfectly. "What are you talking about?" "Look at his hands, Evelyn. They're not shaking. Look at his packing. It's organized by category, labeled systematic. Does that look like severe dementia to you? Does that look like a man who can't manage his own affairs?" I kept packing my back to them, but every nerve was focused on that conversation. "Dr. Monroe diagnosed him," Evelyn said, but her voice had lost certainty. "Mother arranged it. The report says cognitive decline. Your mother arranged a lot of things, but I've been watching him today. He's packed 4 hours worth of belongings in perfect order. He hasn't forgotten a single item. He hasn't asked the same question twice. Evelyn, what if?" "What if what?" Preston's voice dropped even lower. "What if your father isn't as helpless as your mother says? What if we're not helping a confused old man? What if we're attacking someone who knows exactly what we're doing? The silence that followed was heavy as judgment. Preston's doubt was a hairline fracture in Marjorie's perfect plan, barely visible but spreading under pressure. I could hear it in his whisper, see it in the way he'd been watching my steady hands pack. The foundation of their scheme was cracking, and they didn't even realize the earthquake was coming. "You're being paranoid," Evelyn finally said. "Mother knows what she's doing. The medical evaluation was thorough. He's just having a good day." A 4-hour good day where he perfectly packed 43 years of belongings organized and labeled. Preston's voice rose slightly. "Evelyn, I've been around actual dementia patients through my real estate work-assisted living facilities, memory care transitions. This isn't what that looks like. Keep your voice down. I'm serious. What if he's been listening to everything? What if he knows about the power of attorney filing the facility the sale? What if he's been playing us this whole time?" I taped the last box shut, the sound loud in the sudden silence. The tape ripped from the dispenser with a screech that made both of them jump. "All done," I called out, my voice mild and confused. "Did I pack everything you needed, sweetheart? I tried to be organized so I wouldn't lose things." Evelyn appeared in the doorway, studying me with new suspicion. Preston stood behind her, his expression troubled. I looked at them with watery, uncertain eyes, my best confused elderly man face firmly in place. "Should I move these boxes to the storage room now, or do you want to check them first?" Evelyn didn't answer. She pulled Preston back into the hallway, and I heard his whisper clearly. "What if he's been listening to everything?" Preston's whispered doubt hung in my hallway long after they left that Friday afternoon. What if he's been listening to everything? The question was a crack in Marjorie's foundation. By morning, that crack would reach her. And when it did, she'd do exactly what I needed: panic and accelerate. The night after Preston's doubt echoed through my hallway, I called my war council together one last time to ensure every weapon was sharpened, every shield positioned, every trap calibrated for the moment Marjorie would finally overreach. Sam and Clara sat at my kitchen table as twilight turned the harbor from gold to gray outside the windows. The smell of Clara's coffee mixed with the salt air coming through the screen. 3 people who'd chosen to stand against a scheme built on greed and lies. "Final review," I said, spreading the evidence across the table like a general deploying troops. "Every piece, every weapon, no gaps." Sam picked up the property deed first. "Sole ownership, your name only protected by irrevocable trust," Nora established. Desmond confirmed, "No legal challenge possible. This house is yours, period." Clara added the Harbor Partnership shares original certificates from 1887, yellowed but legally pristine. $500,000 in partnership value. Inherited through Nora's great-grandfather, documented, appraised, completely yours. They don't even know these exist. I set down Clara's voice recorder. 17 hours of recordings through the wall. Evelyn discussing the institutionalization scheme. Marjorie planning the sale. Preston questioning but complying. Every conversation they thought was private. Sam produced the recording from my jacket pocket, Dr. Monroe's fraud captured on tape. Monroe, promising Marjorie false medical documentation by Friday. Severe cognitive decline. He never diagnosed, supervised care. He never recommended. Medical fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, all on record. The police report came next. Officer Grant Hale's methodical documentation of Victor Ames's systematic harassment. 2 weeks of stalking documented. Ames fled when confronted at the police station. Official law enforcement acknowledgement of the surveillance conspiracy. Clara pulled out the bank statements Martha Doyle had helped me compile. Every account properly managed, every transaction documented, every bill paid on time. Financial competence proven over 43 years. No confusion, no mismanagement, no need for guardian or power of attorney. I placed Nora's letter on top her prophetic warning about Marjorie's 20-year scheme, her preparations for this exact attack. My wife saw this coming 5 years before it happened. She documented everything, warned me about everything, prepared weapons I didn't even know existed until I needed them. The photograph Lily had found young Harold and Nora with their partnership deed went beside it. Even the children are starting to see through the lies. Lily asked me who was lying, her grandmother or the documents. Innocence is a powerful witness. We were generals on the eve of battle, checking ammunition and fortifications one final time. Marjorie Whitmore thought she was besieging a confused old man in a crumbling fortress. She didn't know the fortress was a trap, and she was walking in with her entire army behind her. "Desmond has the counter documents ready," Sam asked. Revocation of any fraudulent power of attorney filed the second Marjorie tries to submit hers. Proof of competence, proof of fraud, police reports, audio evidence, everything packaged for immediate judicial review. And Otis Greer? Installing the final security locks tomorrow morning. New keys, new system. They won't be able to enter this house without my explicit permission ever again. Clara wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, steam rising in the dimming light. Harold, are you ready for what happens when you reveal all this? When Evelyn realizes you knew everything? That's your daughter. No matter what she's done, that's still going to hurt. I thought about Evelyn at 8 years old, the age Lily was now. Thought about teaching her to ride a bike on the battery, helping her with homework at this same kitchen table, walking her down the aisle at her first wedding before that fell apart. When had I lost her? Or had Marjorie claimed her so long ago I'd just been too blind to see? I'm ready, I said. She stopped being my daughter when she picked out my cage. Now she's just someone trying to steal my home. Sam leaned back, studying the evidence spread across the table. Strategy hasn't changed. We let them present the fraudulent documents. Let them bring the fake medical report, the power of attorney paperwork, whatever appraiser or attorney Marjorie's recruited. Let them commit the felony on the record with witnesses. Then we reveal you've been aware all along and documented their entire conspiracy. No warnings, Clara added. No chances to back out. They crossed the line the day Evelyn filed that first fraudulent petition. Now we make sure there are consequences. I looked at Sam and Clara across my kitchen table. Two people who'd chosen to stand with me when my own blood had chosen to betray me. 43 years washing windows, I'd learned that family isn't always born. Sometimes you build it brick by brick with people who show up when it matters. Thank you, I said simply. Both of you, for everything. Don't thank us yet, Sam said. Wait until we've won. My phone buzzed on the table, the vibration loud in the quiet kitchen. Evelyn's name lit up the screen. Text message. Sam leaned in to read over my shoulder, Clara standing to see. Dad coming Friday at 2 p.m. with real estate appraiser and mother's attorney. We need to finalize your care arrangements and get the property appraised for sale. You'll sign the power of attorney documents then. This has gone on long enough. No more delays. The three of us stared at the message. Friday, Sam said quietly. 2 days from now. She just gave us the exact time and date. Real estate appraiser means they're planning to list the property immediately. Attorney means they have the fraudulent papers ready to sign. It's the full assault, Clara whispered. Everything at once. Execute the power of attorney. Appraise the property, put you in Sunset Acres, sell the house. One coordinated strike to end it. Sam's hand gripped my shoulder. Harold, she just gave us the kill shot. Friday at 2, they're walking in here to commit felony fraud with witnesses and documentation. We'll have them. I read the message again. The arrogance of it, the certainty, the command. No more delays. I smiled. No, I said quietly. She didn't give us a kill shot. She just walked into the trap. Friday's showdown was set. 2 p.m. Real estate appraiser, Marjorie's attorney, fraudulent power of attorney documents ready to sign. But before Evelyn walked into my trap, I needed to close one final door she'd assumed would always be open. Thursday morning at dawn, 2 days before the showdown, Otis Greer arrived at my door with a red toolbox and the kind of high-security deadbolt system that tells the world you're done being vulnerable. Otis Greer, 72 years old. A master locksmith with thick glasses that magnified his careful eyes and fingers permanently stained with graphite from 4 decades of working with keys and cylinders, had known me since the day I first turned my key in this townhouse door in 1985. He'd rekeyed this lock 3 times over the years, replaced the hardware twice, never once asked why I called. Harold. He greeted me, setting his toolbox down with a heavy thud. You said it was urgent. It is. I gestured to the door. I need the most secure locks you have. Military grade if possible. I want this door to open only for me. Sam arrived as Otis was unpacking equipment, drill bits, cylinder housings, something that looked like it belonged in a bank vault rather than a residential door. I'm here as witness, Sam said quietly. Document the timeline, the installation, everything. Otis glanced between us, reading the situation with the wisdom of someone who'd changed locks after divorces, business disputes, and family betrayals for 40 years. These are the same locks we install on bank vaults, he said, holding up a solid brass cylinder that weighed more than the old lock mechanism had weighed complete. 5-pin cylinder, drill-resistant plate, bump-proof, pick-resistant. The only way in without this key is through the wall. That's exactly what I need, Otis. How long? 2 hours, maybe 3 if I reinforce the strike plate with the steel kit. Do it all. Every security measure you can think of. Otis nodded and set to work. The smell of metal shavings and drilling oil filled the entrance hall as Otis dismantled the old lock, the lock that had opened for me for Nora, for Evelyn, when she visited with her spare key she'd taken without asking 30 years ago. Sam photographed each stage of installation, time-stamping everything. The drill screamed against old wood and new steel. The sound echoed through my townhouse like a declaration of war. Otis worked with the methodical precision of a surgeon, saying little, his graphite-stained fingers moving with practiced confidence. After 90 minutes, he stepped back. "Test it," he said. I turned the new key. The deadbolt slid into place with a heavy final click that felt like a vault door sealing. The sound was different from the old lock, deeper, more solid, permanent. "Again," Otis instructed. I locked and unlocked it 5 times. Each time the mechanism moved with oiled precision, the weight of the bolt substantial in my hand. The new lock clicked into place with the finality of a vault door sealing. For 30 years, my door had opened to anyone with a key. Now it only opened for me. Evelyn had assumed access was ownership. She was about to learn the difference. "Harold," Otis said, packing his tools, "I've known you 38 years. Whatever you're protecting yourself from, I hope these locks keep it outside where it belongs." I pressed 3 $50 bills into his hand, twice what he'd quoted. "They will, Otis, thank you." After he left, I stood at my door, running my thumb over the new deadbolt. Cold, heavy, impenetrable. My fortress was complete. Now I waited. Friday arrived with October sunlight and the kind of anticipation that comes before battles you've spent months preparing for. 2 o'clock. I heard them before I saw them. Evelyn's voice on the street, confident and commanding, telling Preston something about staging and sale timelines. Through the window, I watched them approach. Evelyn carried a leather portfolio. Preston looked uncomfortable in a suit. Evelyn climbed the steps to my door, pulled out her key, the spare she'd carried for 3 decades, the one that said she had access whenever she wanted, the one that meant she'd never had to knock or ask or respect that this was my home, not hers. She inserted the key, turned it. Nothing. Her confident expression flickered. She tried again, harder this time. The old key turned uselessly in the new cylinder, wrong pins, wrong configuration, obsolete. "What?" She jiggled the key, pulled it out, examined it like it had betrayed her. "Why won't my key work?" From inside, I waited 5 seconds, let her frustration build. Then I opened the door from within, standing in the frame, not stepping aside, not inviting them in. "Evelyn's sweetheart, Preston, you're here." Evelyn's face was red with frustration. "Dad, why won't my key work? Did you change the locks?" I let confusion cloud my expression. "Oh dear, did I forget to tell you, the locksmith came last week, Thursday, or was it Wednesday? The old lock was broken, wasn't working right. He fixed it. Didn't he give you the new key? You changed the locks without telling me." Evelyn's voice rose. "Dad, we have a meeting. The appraiser is coming any minute. Mother's attorney is on his way. Let us in. Now." I watched my daughter's face transform from confidence to confusion to fury as her key failed in the lock she'd assumed would always open for her. She'd never once asked if she could have a key. She'd simply taken it as if my home was hers by right of blood. Now blood meant nothing against steel. "Of course you can come in," I said mildly. "This is a meeting, but sweetheart, you should probably knock next time. The new lock is quite secure." Preston watched me carefully. His eyes were sharp, calculating. He'd heard his own warning echo in his head. What if Harold isn't as helpless as we think? A silver Mercedes pulled up behind them on the street, tires crunching gravel. The driver's door swung open, and Marjorie Whitmore emerged, designer sunglasses glinting in the October sun, her cream pantsuit immaculate, her voice cutting through the afternoon like a blade. "Evelyn, why are you standing in the street like some beggar? Where is the appraiser? Get in that house now." Evelyn turned to her mother-in-law, the useless key still dangling in her hand, and I watched 30 years of entitlement collide with the reality of a changed lock. I stepped aside and let them into my home, not because Marjorie demanded it, but because Clara's recorder was running and I needed them to say everything they'd been planning while they thought I was too confused to understand. Predators grow careless when they believe the prey is already dead. Through the wall between our townhouses, Clara's voice recorder captured what Marjorie Whitmore said to my daughter when they thought I couldn't hear, and it wasn't the voice of a concerned mother-in-law, it was the voice of a loan shark demanding payment. I was in my kitchen making tea, performing the confused elderly man routine, taking too long to find cups, forgetting which cabinet held the sugar when Marjorie pulled Evelyn into the hallway between my unit and Clara's. Their voices carried through the plaster walls that Charleston builders had constructed more for beauty than soundproofing. Clara was home, her recorder was on, and Marjorie Whitmore was about to confess everything. "Your father's playing you, you fool?" Marjorie's voice cut through the wall like a blade. "No one that stupid changes locks. He knows something. Find those basement files before he figures out what they're worth." Evelyn's response was quieter, desperate. "Mother Whitmore, I've tried everything you said. The doctor's report, the surveillance, the nursing home tour. He's just a window washer. How would he know about partnership shares or trust structures?" Then you didn't look hard enough. And if we can't get the property, Evelyn, we're selling your house to cover what you and Preston owe us. A pause, heavy, pregnant with threat. $60,000, Evelyn. You signed the papers when Preston needed the business loan. You guaranteed it with your inheritance expectations. Find me leverage on your father or find me $60,000 by December. I stood in my kitchen teacup, frozen halfway to the counter, listening to my daughter's world collapse through a wall. I don't have $60,000, Evelyn whispered. You know I don't. This house was supposed to bail you out. Yes, that was the plan. But your senile father just changed the locks and looked me in the eye like he knew exactly what he was doing. So now we have two options: prove him incompetent fast, or I call your loan due and you lose everything you have. I listened to Clara's recording 3 times that evening, each time hearing Marjorie's voice command my daughter like an indentured servant. I understood Evelyn wasn't evil, she was drowning. Marjorie had thrown her a rope with a noose at the end and my daughter had grabbed it thinking it would save her. It didn't excuse what Evelyn had done, but it explained it. Monday morning I walked into Charleston Bank and Trust with the careful shuffle of a man who wanted to appear exactly as confused as they believed I was. But inside Martha Doyle's private office behind closed doors, I dropped the act. Martha Doyle, 66 years old, the bank manager with silver-rimmed reading glasses that hung on a delicate chain and the careful attention of someone who'd spent 40 years spotting financial fraud before it could hurt people, had handled my modest accounts for 15 years with the same respect she gave millionaires. Harold, she greeted me, gesturing to the leather chair across from her desk. Her office smelled of paper and the faint vanilla of her coffee. Your phone call sounded urgent. What can I do for you? I need account verification, Martha. Complete statements, balance confirmation, and a notarized letter stating I'm mentally competent to manage my own finances. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Are you being challenged? Actively. My daughter and her in-laws are claiming I have severe dementia and need a guardian. I need proof that I don't. Martha's expression shifted from concern to something colder, the look of a professional who'd seen financial elder abuse before and hated it. Your accounts are secure, Harold. Current balance of $187,000 across checking and savings. Nora set these up beautifully when she passed life insurance, plus 40 years of careful savings. You're more financially solid than half my business clients. She pulled forms from her desk drawer. I'll have the notarized competence statement ready in 20 minutes. But Harold, I need to tell you something else. The way she said it made my chest tighten. Last Wednesday, someone tried to access your account. The world seemed to tilt slightly. What? Forged power of attorney documents. They claimed you have severe dementia and are incompetent to manage your affairs. The documents authorize them to access all accounts, transfer funds, and close accounts at their discretion. They'd already tried to access my bank account with forged documents, while smiling at my door, while touring my bedroom, while planning my institutionalization. They'd simultaneously been attempting active theft. How many other crimes had they committed that I hadn't discovered yet? I flagged it immediately, Martha continued. The signature didn't match our records. The notary seal was from a county I'd never seen. And Harold, I have your signature from transactions that same week, perfectly clear, perfectly competent. This was obvious fraud. Who presented the documents? A woman in her late 50s, well-dressed, very confident. She became quite angry when I refused to process them, said she'd file a complaint that I was obstructing care for an incompetent elder. Marjorie. It had to be Marjorie. Martha pulled a manila folder from her locked drawer and slid it across the polished desk. The folder was thick official, marked with bank security stamps. I made copies before sending the fraud report to our security department. The forged power of attorney has Dr. Monroe's signature as the evaluating physician, a notary seal I've never seen, and Harold, this is important. It's dated September 28th, claiming you signed over authority while incompetent. September 28th. 2 weeks before they even scheduled the Friday confrontation. They'd been working multiple angles simultaneously. Martha leaned forward, her reading glasses catching the office light. But I have your signature from transactions that same week showing perfect clarity. You deposited a check, you transferred funds between accounts, you asked intelligent questions about interest rates. This isn't just fraud, Harold. She opened the folder, pointing to the forged signature that looked nothing like mine, to Dr. Monroe's official medical letterhead, to the notary seal that probably didn't exist in any legitimate registry. Whoever forged this also committed perjury, medical fraud, and federal banking fraud. You're not just defending yourself anymore. You're sitting on evidence that sends people to prison. Federal banking fraud. Martha's words echoed for 2 days. They'd already committed crimes while I gathered evidence defensively. Time to stop waiting and start hunting. After seeing the bank fraud evidence, I knew waiting for them to act was too passive. It was time to make them believe they'd already won, to bait them into the final fatal mistake. Tuesday night, I created the perfect lie in my basement. A 1995 property appraisal on aged paper showing my townhouse valued at only $185,000 with handwritten notation. Subject to outstanding lien, $45,000 requires clearance before sale. I aged it with coffee stains and careful creasing. It looked authentic because I'd based it on Nora's real 1995 appraisal, just changed the numbers. Thursday afternoon, I invited them over, said I needed help organizing basement documents. Evelyn arrived with Preston and Marjorie, the three moving through my home like prospectors evaluating a claim. I set the trap in plain sight. In my living room, afternoon light streaming through harbor-facing windows, I spread papers across the coffee table, old receipts, insurance documents, Nora's certificates, and buried in the middle, my fake appraisal. "Oh dear," I said, fumbling with the stack. "These old documents from the basement. Nora kept everything so organized I can never find." What was I looking for again? I let several papers slip, scattering across the floor. The fake appraisal landed face up at Evelyn's feet. She picked it up automatically, started to hand it back, then stopped. Her eyes caught the header, Property Valuation Assessment 1585 East Battery Street. I watched her read it. Watched understanding dawn, not truth, but the lie I'd designed. "Dad," she said carefully, "this is an old appraisal, from 1995. Yes, Nora had that done when we refinanced, or was it when we didn't? I can't remember." Evelyn's hands trembled, holding the paper. "It says the property was valued at $185,000, and there's a notation about a lien, $45,000. Marjorie materialized at Evelyn's shoulder. "Let me see that." I was a fisherman dropping chum in the water, watching sharks circle. The forged document showed a property barely worth taking, mortgage distressed, a paperwork nightmare. Exactly what Marjorie needed to see to believe she could swoop in as savior and thief simultaneously. Marjorie studied the document with cold calculation. I could see her mind working. If the property was worth so little in 1995 with outstanding liens, perhaps Harold's situation was more desperate than she'd realized. "Harold," she said, voice dripping false concern, "do you know if this lien was ever paid off?" I let confusion cloud my face. Nora handled all that. The bank sends papers sometimes. I just sign them." "When was the last mortgage payment?" "Mortgage, I thought. Didn't we pay that off, or was that the car? Everything runs together." Preston watched me carefully, troubled. But Evelyn and Marjorie were too focused on the document to notice his doubt. Before I reveal what Marjorie decided to do with that information, are you still with me? Comment. A, if you think Harold's bait will work, or B, if they'll see through it and tell me why in one short reason. Quick note, what follows includes some dramatized details for storytelling impact. The lesson is what matters. Marjorie's smile was sharp as a blade. "Harold, dear, you're in financial trouble and too confused to know it. This property could go into foreclosure. That lien means debt you haven't cleared. The bank could seize everything." She was improvising beautifully, building crisis from my planted seeds. "But we can help. Sign the power of attorney. Let us handle the complicated financial details. We'll negotiate with the bank, clear the lien, save what equity remains. You'll be safe in a care facility while we protect your interests." Evelyn nodded eagerly. "Dad, this is serious. You can't handle this alone." I let my shoulders slump, defeat written in every line. "I don't understand all this financial talk. If you think it's best—" "We do," Marjorie said firmly. "And we need to act immediately. Monday. No more delays." She pulled out her phone, making calls right there, arranging pieces, assembling her final assault. "Monday at 10 a.m. We're bringing the nursing home director from Sunset Acres, our family attorney, and a title company representative. You'll sign the power of attorney, Harold, and we'll manage everything." Evelyn looked relieved. Preston looked sick. I nodded, meekly, trembling hands convincing. "If you think that's best, I just don't want to lose Nora's house." "You won't," Marjorie lied smoothly. "We're family. We're protecting you." Marjorie smiled at me like I was a child who needed guidance, and I smiled back like a man grateful for help. But behind my eyes, I counted the felonies she'd just committed to fraud, conspiracy, elder exploitation. Monday, she'd add perjury and theft, and I'd be there with every weapon I'd spent 2 months sharpening. They stood to leave Marjorie, smoothing her designer suit, victory radiating from her cold smile. "Monday at 10 a.m. We're bringing everyone needed to finalize this. You'll sign the power of attorney, and we'll handle everything from there. No more confusion, no more struggling." I nodded meekly, shoulders slumped. "Thank you. I'm so confused about all this. I'm lucky to have family who cares." Evelyn actually teared up, believing her own performance. But as they walked to the door, Preston glanced back. And in that moment, I let the mask slip for just an instant. Let him see past the confused elderly man to the steel underneath. The trap closing. The hunter waiting. Preston's face went pale. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then closed it. Marjorie was already in the hallway discussing Monday's logistics. I held Preston's gaze for 3 seconds. Long enough for him to know, long enough for doubt to become certainty. Then I let confusion return to my expression, shuffling after them like a grateful, helpless old man. "See you Monday," I called out, voice wavering. "Thank you for helping me." Marjorie didn't look back. Evelyn waved distractedly. But Preston stood on my doorstep for a moment longer, staring at me with the expression of someone who'd just realized they were standing in a trap and the door was already closing. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, the final battle I'd spent 2 months preparing for. I could hardly wait. Preston saw it, that one instant when I let the mask slip, when I let him see the steel behind the confusion. And now he knew what I'd intended him to know, that his mother-in-law was walking into a trap. Friday night, Preston pulled Evelyn into their car outside my townhouse, and I watched through the window as he gestured frantically, his fear finally catching up to what his instincts had been screaming for weeks, that something about my surrender was terribly, deliberately wrong. I couldn't hear their conversation through the glass, but I didn't need to. I could see it in Preston's body language, the desperate gestures, the pleading expressions, the way he gripped Evelyn's arm, trying to make her understand. She pulled away, shook her head, crossed her arms. The argument lasted 10 minutes. Then Evelyn got out of the car, slammed the door, and walked back toward my townhouse before changing her mind and heading to her own car instead. Preston sat alone in the driver's seat for a long moment before driving away. He'd tried to warn her. She hadn't listened. Saturday morning, I went to the harbor for my ritual walk. The October air was crisp, the water gray-blue under morning clouds. I walked the docks where Sam and I usually met, breathing salt air and thinking about Monday. Victor Ames stepped out from behind a shipping container. "Old man," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Monday you better sign what they tell you to sign. People who don't cooperate have accidents, falls, confusion. You understand?" He was close enough that I could smell cigarettes and desperation on him. His hand was in his jacket pocket, suggesting a weapon he probably didn't have. I looked at him calmly. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Ames? I'm warning you, for your own good." "Harold!" Sam's voice came from 30 feet away, running toward us, and behind him, Officer Grant Hale in uniform, hand on his radio. Ames's face went white. "That's a direct threat," Hale said, approaching with professional calm. "Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for criminal threats and attempted intimidation of a witness." "Witness to what I didn't?" "To fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. And now you've added assault to the list." Hale cuffed him efficiently. "Mr. Bennett already has a police report on your surveillance and harassment. You just upgraded from civil complaint to criminal charges." Sam had called Hale the moment he saw Ames following me. They'd been coordinating, waiting for Ames to make exactly this mistake. I watched Victor Ames get led away in handcuffs, his role in Marjorie's scheme ending not with payment, but with prosecution. I watched Preston's face through my window that Friday night. The fear, the recognition, the desperate attempt to warn someone who wouldn't listen. He was the only Whitmore who'd developed a conscience, and it was going to cost him everything, but not as much as it would cost the others. Sunday evening, I convened the final war council in my basement. Sam Clara and Desmond Ashford sat around the table where Nora and I used to plan our finances back when planning meant saving for a vacation or fixing the roof. Now it meant weaponizing 2 months of evidence gathering into a legal counterattack that would destroy a conspiracy. Desmond spread the documents across the table with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. "Property deed," he said. "Sole ownership, irrevocable trust, no legitimate challenge possible." "Harbor partnership shares," Sam added. "Original certificates, $500,000 appraised value, completely yours." Clara set down her recorder. 17 hours of audio, every scheme, every threat, every plan to institutionalize you, Marjorie's voice, Evelyn's voice, all of it time-stamped and documented. Desmond continued through the arsenal. Dr. Monroe's recorded fraud promising false medical documentation for payment, police report documenting Victor Ames's systematic harassment and yesterday's arrest for criminal threats, bank fraud documentation from Martha Doyle showing someone attempted to access your accounts with forged power of attorney documents, and Nora's letter predicting this exact scenario 5 years ago. He looked up at me, his silver hair catching the basement's harsh light. "Harold, I'll be there at 10 a.m. tomorrow as your legal counsel. The moment they present fraudulent documents, I'll present ours. Every recording, every police report, every bank fraud attempt documented, notarized, irrefutable. They'll walk in thinking they're executing a guardianship. They'll walk out facing criminal charges." Sam leaned forward. "Clara will be recording from next door. I'll be outside as witness to who enters and exits. Grant Hale is on standby if we need police presence for arrests." "And the staged document?" Clara asked. The fake appraisal you let them find. Proof of their intent, Desmond said. They grabbed false information showing a nearly worthless property and used it to justify immediate action. It demonstrates they weren't trying to help Harold, they were trying to exploit what they believed was his vulnerability. We reviewed the plan 3 more times. Every contingency, every possible reaction, every legal countermove already anticipated. When my allies left around 9 p.m., the house fell into stillness. Sunday night, the townhouse fell silent. My allies had gone home. My evidence was secured, my suit hung ready on the closet door. It was the silence before a hurricane makes landfall, the air pressure dropping, the birds gone quiet, everyone who knows holding their breath. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., the storm would hit. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the master bedroom I'd packed up on command weeks ago, then quietly moved back into after they'd stopped paying attention. The bedroom Nora and I had shared for 38 years. From my closet, I pulled out my Navy suit, the one I'd worn to Nora's funeral 5 years ago, the one I'd sworn I'd never need for another battle. I laid it carefully on the chair, smoothed the lapels, set my tie beside it, the burgundy one Nora had bought me for our 30th anniversary. On my dresser, Nora's photograph smiled at me, young, vibrant, standing at the harbor with our partnership shares deed held high like a trophy. Tomorrow, my love, I said quietly to her image. Tomorrow I use every weapon you left me. Tomorrow they learn what it costs to underestimate a window washer. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. Not because I needed it, I'd probably be awake by 4, but because ritual matters. Because preparing for battle means honoring the small disciplines. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., Marjorie Whitmore would walk through my door believing she'd won. She'd bring her attorney, her documents, her nursing home director, her title company representative. And I would be waiting with 43 years of window washing patience, 2 months of evidence gathering, and my late wife's final gift, the knowledge that some traps take decades to set, but only seconds to spring. Friday morning arrived with October sunlight and the cold clarity that comes before battles you've spent months preparing for. I dressed in my Navy suit, adjusted my tie in the mirror, and saw not a confused elderly man, but someone who'd learned patience in 43 years of washing windows 40 stories up. Today, that patience would pay dividends Marjorie Whitmore couldn't imagine. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. I watched through the window as Marjorie emerged from a black town car flanked by 2 people in business suits carrying leather portfolios. Behind them, Evelyn and Preston climbed out of a separate vehicle. The invasion force had arrived confident and organized, ready to execute their final assault on a man they believed was too confused to defend himself. I opened the door before they could knock again. "Good morning," I said calmly. "Please come in." Marjorie swept past me with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. The 2 professionals followed a woman in her 50s with a Sunset Acres name badge and a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Gregory Thornton, attorney. Evelyn and Preston entered last. Evelyn looked determined. Preston looked sick. They arranged themselves in my living room like generals positioning troops. Marjorie took the wing-back chair near the window, the power position. Her attorney stood beside her. The nursing home director sat on the couch opening her portfolio. I remained standing. "Harold, dear," Marjorie began, her voice warm and poisonous. "I've brought professionals who can explain the benefits of Sunset Acres memory care. It's really the most sensible solution for everyone. Before we discuss anything," I said quietly, "I'd like you to meet my attorney, Desmond Ashford." The basement door opened. Desmond stepped into the living room, immaculate in his 3-piece suit, carrying a briefcase that I knew contained 2 months of documented evidence. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Your attorney?" Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. "Since when do you have an attorney?" "Since I realized I might need one," I said. "Desmond has handled my family's affairs for 30 years. He knew Nora quite well." Desmond nodded professionally to the room. "Desmond Ashford, Estate and Elder Law. I'm here as Mr. Bennett's legal counsel to ensure any discussions today are conducted properly and ethically." Marjorie's calculated composure flickered. Gregory Thornton. Her attorney straightened slightly, the posture of a lawyer who'd just realized the easy case had become complicated. "This is highly irregular," Marjorie said. "We're family trying to help an elderly man in crisis. Legal representation seems hostile." "Family is exactly why legal representation is necessary," Desmond replied coolly. "Shall we proceed?" The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Through the wall, I heard Clara moving in her townhouse, recording everything as planned. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from my kitchen where Sam waited, document camera ready. Preston shifted his weight nervously, his eyes darting between me and Marjorie. He knew. He'd seen the trap closing on Thursday, and now he was watching it spring. Marjorie regrouped quickly. "Very well. If Harold wants witnesses to his own intervention, so be it. She gestured to the nursing home director. "This is Patricia Wells from Sunset Acres. She's prepared a lovely private room for you, Harold. Single occupancy, very affordable given your financial situation." "My financial situation is quite stable," I said. "Harold, we've seen the documents, the old appraisal, the lien notations. You're facing foreclosure and don't even realize it. That's why we need to act now." "Before anyone signs anything," Evelyn interrupted, tears suddenly filling her eyes. "I need to tell you something, Dad." Here it was, the final manipulation, the card she'd been holding. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice breaking convincingly. "I didn't want to tell you like this, but I'm pregnant. We need this house sale to provide stability for your grandchild. We need the equity to make sure your grandchild has a secure future." Preston's face went white. "Evelyn, what are you—" he started, then stopped. He hadn't known. She'd manufactured this lie right here, right now as her final weapon. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, saw the desperation, the calculated tears, the willingness to invent a grandchild to manipulate her own father. When had she learned this level of cruelty, or had Marjorie simply given her permission to reveal what was always there? "That's a touching story, Evelyn," I said quietly. "Almost as touching as the medical capacity evaluation you forged with Dr. Monroe." The room went silent. "What?" Evelyn's tears stopped as confusion replaced performance. "Dr. Monroe," I repeated. "The physician you paid to produce a fraudulent competency report claiming I have severe cognitive decline. The report you plan to present today as justification for guardianship. The report that, unfortunately for you, I recorded him promising to falsify on your behalf." Marjorie stood abruptly. "Harold, you're confused. You're not making sense." "I'm making perfect sense, just as I made perfect sense when I documented the attempts to access my bank accounts with forged power of attorney documents. When I changed my locks after you assumed you had permanent access. When I filed police reports about Victor Ames's harassment and photographing campaign. When I invited you here today knowing exactly what you planned to do." I thought of Nora in that moment, how she would have smiled seeing me finally stand firm, how she'd prepared for this exact confrontation 5 years before her death, leaving me weapons I hadn't known I needed. How her letter had told me everything that Marjorie had been circling this property for 20 years, that Evelyn had learned greed young, that someday I'd need to choose between being a father and protecting what mattered. Today I chose protection. I looked at each of them, Marjorie with her calculated composure, finally cracking Evelyn with tears she thought were her winning card, now drying on her face, Preston with confusion and fear written across his features. Then I stood and walked toward the basement door. "Before anyone signs anything, there's something in the basement you all need to see." I walked to the basement door and pulled it open. Cool air rushed up from the darkness below, carrying the scent of old paper and cedar, the smell of carefully preserved secrets. "This way," I said. Marjorie hesitated at the top of the stairs. Her attorney, Gregory Thornton, looked uncertain, but Desmond gestured politely, and one by one they descended into the space where Nora had prepared my arsenal 5 years before her death. The basement wasn't the dusty, forgotten storage they expected. It was organized like an archive, filing cabinets labeled by year, a locked safe, plastic-wrapped documents arranged with the precision of a teacher who'd spent 40 years organizing lesson plans. I flipped the light switch. Fluorescent bulbs hummed to life, illuminating my war room. "What is this?" Evelyn whispered. "This," I said, walking to the safe, "is what your mother left me, the weapons I needed when you finally made your move." I opened the safe combination memorized from the charm bracelet key Nora had worn every day of our marriage. Inside, arranged in order, was everything. I pulled out the first item carefully. Aged paper, yellowed but preserved in archival plastic. Original certificates with ornate calligraphy and official seals. "Charleston Harbor Partnership shares," I said, holding them up to the light. Dated 1887, inherited through Nora's great-grandfather when the partnership was first formed. These certificates represent ownership rights to commercial harbor space, docking fees, and warehouse revenue. "Old paper," Marjorie said dismissively. "Worthless historical documents. Officer Grant Hale from the Charleston Historical Maritime Assets Division appraised them last month. Current value $500,000, $500,000, Marjorie, and you didn't even know they existed." I set them on the table and pulled out the next document. Property deed. Sole ownership in my name, protected by irrevocable trust, Nora established in 2003. No mortgage, no liens, no outstanding debt. The fake appraisal you found, the one showing a struggling property worth barely $200,000. I created that specifically for you to find. I wanted to see how quickly you'd grab at what you thought was a desperate man's last asset. Evelyn's face went white. You've been pretending this whole time." "Learning," I corrected. learning exactly what you were capable of, documenting it. Because Nora told me this day would come and she made sure I'd be ready. I pulled out the sealed envelope, Nora's handwriting across the front, open when Evelyn makes her move. Your mother knew, I said, breaking the seal. 5 years before she died, she predicted this exact scheme. She documented your questions about property values. She noted when you started asking about power of attorney and guardianship laws. She watched you circle this house like you were already measuring it for sale. I read from Nora's letter. Evelyn learned greed young. She will come with others behind her people who see only money where we built a life. When she does, Harold show her this, you are not weak, you are not confused, and you are not alone. I have prepared everything you need to protect what we built together. My hands steady from decades gripping window washing equipment 40 stories up didn't tremble once as I laid out each piece of evidence. Desmond, I said, show them the rest. Desmond opened his briefcase. Bank statements showing attempted fraudulent access to Mr. Bennett's accounts on September 28th using forged power of attorney documents. The bank flagged it as fraud and filed reports. Police documentation of Victor Ames's systematic harassment and surveillance, including his arrest Saturday for criminal threats. Audio recordings provided by Clara Mills, 17 hours of conversations where you, Evelyn, and you, Marjorie, discussed the institutionalization scheme property sale and how to manufacture evidence of incompetence. Clara stepped forward from the basement stairs where she'd been quietly witnessing. I recorded everything through our shared wall, she said. Every word. We climbed back upstairs to the living room. Morning light still streamed through the harbor-facing windows, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Sam stood near the door, document camera in hand, photographing every reaction. Desmond laid out the complete evidence across my coffee table like a prosecutor presenting a case. This estate house, purchased in 1985 Harbor shares, inherited 2018 savings accounts, totals $2.3 million. Mr. Bennett is sole legal owner with full mental capacity, documented financial competence, and zero legitimate claims against him. The doorbell rang. Sam opened it. Officer Grant Hale stepped inside in uniform, holding official documents. Mr. Bennett requested my presence, Hale said formally. I have emergency restraining orders preventing Evelyn Bennett, Preston Whitmore, and Marjorie Whitmore from contacting Harold Bennett or entering this property. Additionally, I have arrest warrants ready to execute if anyone here has made threats or attempted coercion. Preston finally found his voice. Evelyn, he said quietly, fury contained like a bomb waiting to detonate. You told me he was confused. You said doctors confirmed dementia. You showed me the nursing home brochure and said it was mercy. I was trying to... You lied to me, to my mother, to everyone. And now we're facing restraining orders and criminal charges because you couldn't wait for a man to die naturally before stealing his home. Evelyn's face looked like glass the moment before it shatters, still holding its shape but already fractured beyond repair. The composure, the tears, the performance, all of it crumbling as she realized the trap had closed and there was no escape. Patricia Wells, the nursing home director, stood abruptly. I was told this was a standard guardianship case. If there's fraud involved, Sunset Acres wants no part of it. She gathered her portfolio and left without another word. Gregory Thornton, Marjorie's attorney, did the same. Mrs. Whitmore, I cannot represent you in criminal matters. I suggest you retain separate counsel immediately. And then there were 5, me, Evelyn, Preston, Marjorie, and the wreckage of their scheme scattered across my coffee table. Marjorie's voice cut through the silence, sharp and cold as winter harbor wind. She turned to Evelyn, color draining from her face, her hands shaking with fury. I'd never seen her lose control enough to show. You told me he was senile. You told me this house was yours. Marjorie's fury filled my living room like a physical force. Her ice blue eyes blazed at Evelyn with the cold rage of someone who'd been made a fool. And in Marjorie Whitmore's world, being fooled was the unforgivable sin. Evelyn's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air, but Marjorie wasn't finished. You told me he was senile, Marjorie repeated, her voice rising. You showed me that nursing home brochure. You said the doctors confirmed dementia. You said this house was yours to inherit, that we were helping a confused old man protect his final years. You thought you could use my family's name and resources to commit elder abuse for profit. Marjorie turned to Preston, her command absolute. You will file for annulment today. This woman lied to us about everything, the house, his mental state, the inheritance. We are victims here, Preston, victims of her fraud. Preston stood frozen, looking between his mother and his wife. Mother, we can't just... We can, and we will. This marriage was based on false pretenses. She claimed her father was incompetent and she'd inherit valuable property. He's neither incompetent nor does she inherit anything. That's textbook fraud. Evelyn grabbed Preston's arm desperately. Preston, you can't believe her. Tell them we're a team. We planned this together. It was the wrong thing to say. Preston pulled away from her like she'd burned him. You planned it. I'm sorry, I can't. Preston, please. Mother's right, he said, refusing to meet Evelyn's eyes. This marriage was based on false pretenses. I was told your father was in crisis, that we were helping. Instead, we're facing restraining orders and potential criminal charges. I won't go to prison for you. Desmond Ashford stepped forward, professional and precise. For the record, Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm documenting your statements claiming victimhood. However, I have 17 hours of audio recordings where both of you actively participated in planning this scheme. You discussed institutionalization, property sale, and how to manufacture evidence. You may wish to consult with your own legal counsel before making further statements. Marjorie's face went rigid. Preston, we're leaving, now. She swept toward the door and Preston followed like he'd been following his entire life, obedient, terrified, unable to stand against the woman who'd raised him to value money over morality. Evelyn chased them into the entrance hall. You can't leave me here. We planned this together, Preston. I'm your wife. For about 6 more hours, Preston said quietly. I'm filing paperwork this afternoon. They reached the door. Evelyn grabbed Preston's sleeve, desperate. Don't leave me here. We're supposed to be partners. Preston pulled away with the strength of pure self-preservation. You planned it. I was just stupid enough to believe you. I'm sorry. I can't. The town car door slammed. Then silence. Evelyn stood in my entrance hall, abandoned by the people she'd allied with to destroy me. Officer Grant Hale moved to the doorway, blocking her path back inside. Ms. Bennett, he said formally, you need to leave the property. The restraining order is in effect immediately. You're prohibited from contacting Mr. Bennett or entering this address for a minimum of 6 months pending criminal investigation. This is my father's house. This is Mr. Bennett's house. You have no legal claim to it. You need to leave now or I'll be forced to arrest you for violating a protection order. Evelyn looked at me one last time. I saw the calculation in her eyes, wondering if tears would work, if pleading would work, if the word dad would crack my resolve. I stood silent, Desmond at my side, the evidence of her betrayal spread across my coffee table. She left. The door closed behind her and I heard her calling my name from the sidewalk, her voice breaking with what might have been genuine distress or just another performance. I couldn't tell anymore and it didn't matter. That evening, after the lawyers left and the police reports were filed and the restraining orders were served, I sat in my living room with the people who'd actually stood by me. Clara Mills sat in the chair by the window, the one Marjorie had occupied this morning when she'd thought she held all the power. Sam Rivera leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, satisfied smile on his face. Lily Whitmore, Preston's daughter, who'd found the photograph in my basement and asked the questions adults were afraid to voice, sat across from Clara, quietly helping arrange the place settings with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that small acts of care matter. Grant Hale stood by the door in civilian clothes, now off duty but present as a friend. Nora would be so proud of you, Harold, Clara said softly. You protected everything she built. Everything we built together, I corrected. She prepared the weapons. I just had to be smart enough to use them. Sam grinned. 68 years old and you just taught everyone a masterclass in patience and justice. How long did you know? That first phone call, I admitted. When Evelyn called from the airport demanding I move to the storage room, something in her voice told me this wasn't about helping me, it was about clearing me out. And you spent 2 months building the perfect trap, Grant said. I spent 40 years washing windows on buildings taller than most people's dreams, I replied. I learned to hold on tight and never look down. When you're 40 stories up with nothing but a harness and a squeegee, you learn patience. You learn to trust your equipment. You learn that rushing gets you killed. I looked around at the faces of people who'd chosen to stand with me, not bound by blood, but by something stronger, honor. Clara, who'd risked her neighbor's wrath to record evidence. Sam, who'd documented harassment and stood witness to every confrontation. Lily, who'd asked the questions adults were afraid to voice. Grant, who'd enforced the law even when family dynamics made it uncomfortable. Thank you, I said simply. All of you. You're the family I needed when blood failed me. Through the tall windows, I could still see Evelyn standing on the sidewalk across the street, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling anyone who might give her sympathy or money or shelter. She looked small from here, diminished. I walked to the window and drew the curtains closed, turned to Clara and Sam and finally allowed myself to smile. The war was over. 3 weeks after the showdown, I woke to silence, the kind of quiet that only comes when your home finally belongs to you again. The morning light filtered through curtains I'd opened without fear for the first time in months. November 20th, Tuesday. The restraining order had held. Officer Hale Grant, as he insisted I call him now, texted daily updates. No violations, no attempts at contact, no reason to worry. The house smelled like lemon polish and fresh coffee instead of dread. I spent that first week deep cleaning every room Evelyn had touched, scrubbed the kitchen counters where she'd slammed those fake medical bills, donated the guest room bedding she'd slept on to Goodwill, replaced the lock on the basement door she'd tried to pick that night in September. Each small act felt like reclaiming territory 1 square foot at a time. The second week I organized Nora's archive properly. The 1880s harbor development shares $500,000 in current value according to 3 independent appraisals went into a safety deposit box at First National. The property deed, the bank statements showing Evelyn's attempted transfers, Dr. Monroe's forged medical letter, all filed chronologically in waterproof containers with digital backups on Clara's office server. Desmond Ashford. My attorney had compiled the final estate assessment, $2.3 million total. The townhouse alone appraised at $1.6 million. Nora's investment accounts, the harbor shares vintage bonds I'd never known existed. Suddenly, I wasn't just a 73-year-old retiree worried about heating bills. I was a 73-year-old retiree who could afford to live. On Thursday of week 3, I met with Desmond's recommended financial advisor, a sharp woman named Patricia Holloway who specialized in elder care wealth management. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Marjorie had demanded I sign guardianship papers, and walked me through dividend schedules. The harbor shares alone generate approximately $18,000 annually, Patricia explained, sliding a projection sheet across the oak surface. Her pen tapped each line item. Conservative investment strategy on the liquid assets yields another $42,000. You're looking at comfortable supplemental income without touching principal. I stared at the numbers. $18,000 a year from certificates my great-grandfather purchased in 1882. Nora never mentioned these. Sometimes the most valuable gifts are the ones we discover when we need them most, Patricia said gently. The metaphor hit me while washing windows that afternoon. Funny how clarity comes during mundane tasks. I stood on a step stool wiping away 3 months of grime, watching the glass transform from cloudy to transparent. That's what this whole ordeal had been, scrubbing away the fog of manipulation until I could finally see truth clearly. Evelyn hadn't created the dirt. She'd just exploited what was already there. My loneliness, my grief, my desperate wish for family. But now the windows were clean and I could see exactly who stood on which side. According to Clara's careful intelligence network, Sam's rideshare driver gossip combined with Lily's salon connections, Evelyn's life had collapsed spectacularly. Preston filed for annulment within 48 hours of the basement confrontation, citing fraud and deception. His attorney argued the marriage was contracted under false pretenses, specifically the fake pregnancy claim Evelyn had deployed as a last-ditch manipulation tactic. Massachusetts law favored Preston's case. The annulment would be finalized by December. Marjorie, facing potential conspiracy charges from the district attorney's office, had blocked Evelyn's number and refused all contact. The nursing home director fired her the day after Officer Hale's visit, unwilling to employ someone under investigation for elder abuse and fraud. Her real estate license faced suspension pending review by the state board. Evelyn's Cambridge apartment lease expired November 15th. According to Sam, who'd driven past out of morbid curiosity, she'd moved into a weekly rate motel near the highway. No references, no recent employment history, no family willing to vouch for her. Every job application hit dead ends when background checks revealed the restraining order and pending investigations. The letter arrived November 22nd, Wednesday. I recognized Evelyn's handwriting immediately, the same looping script that had signed those fraudulent medical consent forms. My hands trembled slightly as I held the envelope. Part of me, the part that had genuinely cared for this woman, had believed in the granddaughter fantasy, wanted to open it. Wanted to know what she'd say now that consequences had caught up with manipulation. But I thought about Nora's letter instead. The one she'd sealed in 1985, trusting I'd find it when wisdom outweighed curiosity. I walked to the basement, turned on the overhead light, and looked at her photograph on the archive shelf. She gazed back with that knowing smile, the one that said, "You already know what you need to know, Harold." I filed Evelyn's letter unopened in a manila folder labeled Closed Matters, November 2023, placed it on the shelf next to the evidence containers. Didn't read it, didn't burn it, didn't grant it power by engaging, just archived it like any other document from a finished chapter. When I came back upstairs, my phone was ringing. Clara. "Harold, I'm calling about Thanksgiving," she said, warmth flooding through the receiver. "Sam's hosting at his place this year. Turkey, all the fixings, absolutely too much pie. We'd love to have you." I looked around my clean, quiet, safe townhouse. Looked at the windows with their crystal clear glass. Looked at the future that suddenly felt open instead of threatened. I'd be honored, I said. Wonderful. Thursday at 2. And Harold, Clara paused. We're grateful you're still here. After we hung up, I made tea and sat in Nora's chair by the window. The November afternoon light slanted golden across the hardwood floors. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was composing desperate letters I'd never read. But here in the home I'd fought to keep, I was simply grateful to be alive, aware and surrounded by people who loved me for who I actually was. The war was over. Now came the peace. Clara carefully set the perfectly roasted turkey down on my dining room table, marking the very first Thanksgiving meal in this house since my beloved Nora had passed away. And in that tender moment I realized with absolute clarity that family was never truly about blood. Sam cheerfully carried in a piping hot sweet potato casserole, while Lily meticulously arranged the place settings around the table. Grant Hale arrived shortly after, bringing a bottle of fine wine and a repository of entertaining patrol stories from his shifts. The elegant dining room that had tragically witnessed Marjorie's malicious guardianship ambush just 2 months prior now smelled beautifully, like sage-melted butter and home. Clara raised her wine glass first, her eyes locked onto mine. Harold, watching you courageously fight for your life and dignity, taught me that I could do it too, she said, her voice steady and proud. I finally ended it with him. The house stays entirely mine. Her long-term partner had been relentlessly pressuring her to refinance her inherited family property and legally add his name to the deed. My intense, harrowing battle against Evelyn's greed had crystallized something profound deep within her. You did that all yourself, I told her softly, offering a reassuring smile. I just showed you that standing up for yourself was possible. You showed all of us what was possible, Lily chimed in. The 16-year-old girl looked significantly older and more mature than she had back in September. There was a harder-won, resilient wisdom shining in her young eyes. Grandfather Harold, I stood up in court and told the family judge absolutely everything that Grandma Marjorie had said to me, about how she cruelly called me stupid for wanting to attend a local community college, and about the massive amount of money she explicitly promised Dad if he helped her secure your forced guardianship. What happened after you testified? I asked, holding my breath. Dad completely lost his partial custody rights, Lily said, a wave of visible relief instantly softening her facial features. I officially chose to live with Mom. The judge actually listened to me. Sam cleared his throat loudly, a broad, triumphant grin spreading across his face. Speaking of people listening, the Historic Harbor Committee formally approved our joint investment proposal this morning. You and me partner, it becomes official as of December 1st. I stared at him in utter disbelief. Partner? Your $500,000 in Harbor shares, my $200,000 in liquid capital, and our combined maritime expertise. Sam slid a sleek leather folder across the wooden table toward me. Projected financial returns over the next 5 years could easily triple both of our investments. But more than just the money, we are actively preserving a piece of historic waterfront. No tacky luxury condos, no greedy corporate buyouts, just smart, ethical, community-minded development. The detailed document inside showed meticulous financial projections, official committee approvals, and gorgeous architectural renderings that beautifully honored Charleston's rich maritime history instead of completely erasing it for profit. My great-grandfather's original 1882 investment wasn't just generating annual dividends anymore, it was actively shaping the bright future of the city. To chosen family, Grant said warmly, raising his glass high into the air. We all toasted together. The turkey was absolutely perfect. Clara's homemade cornbread stuffing tasted exactly like Nora's old secret recipe. Lily happily told us funny stories about her high school drama club. Sam described a generous passenger who had tipped him a whopping $200 after passionately hearing about our new harbor preservation project. Grant shared reassuring restraining order updates. There had been 0 violations, 0 contact from the abusers, and 0 worries. The dinner conversation flowed incredibly easy and warm. This was exactly what Thanksgiving was always supposed to feel like. It wasn't about toxic obligation or manipulative mind games. It was about pure, unadulterated gratitude for the people who genuinely chose to sit at your table. After dessert was finished and the dishes were cleared, I stood alone at my kitchen sink, washing the heavy silver serving platter completely by hand. It was the very same platter Nora had joyfully used every single holiday for 40 years. The very next morning, I went right back to honest work. Sam picked me up in his truck right at sunrise. The massive 40-story downtown office building required its scheduled quarterly exterior cleaning. I suited up in my heavy gear, checked the platform rigging twice for safety, and stepped out onto the metal scaffold just as the morning sun beautifully broke over Charleston Harbor. Most men who suddenly win a legal battle worth $2.3 million immediately stop working, Sam joked, securely fastening my primary safety line to the harness. Yet here you are washing windows at the crack of dawn. Why on earth would I retire? I said efficiently, squeegeeing the very first pane of glass. This is exactly where I think the clearest 40 stories up in the air with the whole bustling city spread out below me. And it was the absolute truth. The rhythmic, repetitive motion, the familiar chemical smell of the cleaning solution, the sharp squeak of rubber moving on glass, it centered my soul. Up here, life's complex problems looked so much smaller. Perspectives shifted effortlessly. The vast view reminded me of what truly mattered in this life: solid work, honest effort, and the deep satisfaction of transforming something cloudy into something perfectly clear. What is a luxurious retirement even worth if you lose the very work that defines who you are? I had spent 50 years of my life washing windows, and I wasn't about to stop now just because my bank account happened to have a few more zeros at the end of it. The money provided safety and security, but the work provided my core identity. Later that afternoon, I met with attorney Desmond Ashford to officially finalize the Nora Bennett Scholarship Fund. I contributed $50,000 to seed the endowment, which was specifically designed for working-class Charleston youth pursuing higher education at local technical schools, community colleges, or specialized trade programs. Nora firmly believed that everyone deserved a fair chance in life. I told Desmond earnestly as I signed the official trust documents. This fund gives good kids like us a real shot. The very first scholarship was set to be awarded in the spring of 2024. Clara, Sam, and Lily would all proudly serve on the selection committee together, a chosen family actively choosing and uplifting the next generation. As the weeks passed, my days settled into a wonderful, comforting rhythm. I enjoyed dawn coffee while sitting peacefully in Nora's favorite chair. Morning work followed washing windows, professional consultations, and harbor committee meetings. My afternoons were spent taking long, reflective walks through the beautiful historic district. Evening meals were a delight. Sometimes I spent them completely alone with a good book, and sometimes I shared them with Clara Grant, or both. We even started weekly dinners with the entire group, rotating houses each time. The spacious townhouse felt entirely full again. Not crowded or invaded like before, but genuinely and warmly inhabited. I had permanently opened up the guest room for Lily whenever she needed a safe space away from her parents' messy divorce drama. The basement remained completely organized, the evidence meticulously archived but easily accessible if Evelyn's ongoing legal troubles required my formal testimony in court. Mid-December quickly arrived, bringing unusually warm weather with it. I stood at my harbor view window on a quiet Tuesday evening, holding Nora's framed photograph tenderly in my hands. The sun was setting gloriously over the water, painting the entire horizon in deep shades of amber and bronze. The harbor at sunset looked like hammered metal, solid, enduring, and worth far more than any financial appraisal could ever measure. I thought deeply about the long, exhausting journey from September to now. The paralyzing fear I felt when Evelyn first moved in and took over. The devastating betrayal when her cruel scheme finally unraveled. The desperate, lonely fight to protect my home and my basic dignity. And ultimately the sweet victory that came not from material wealth but from standing in the truth, relying on chosen family, and honoring Nora's timeless wisdom. "We did it, love," I whispered softly to the photograph, feeling a tear slip down my cheek. "We successfully protected our home. 68 years of living on this earth had taught me this invaluable lesson: you don't need a single drop of shared blood to build a real family. You need honor. You need loyal people who show up for you, not because they want a piece of your assets, but because they genuinely value your presence in their lives. You need the courage to fight like hell for what matters, and the wisdom to recognize when someone is trying to take it away from you." The harbor shares the historic house, the family legacy. They were never truly about the money. They were about keeping sacred promises. It was the eternal promise I had made to Nora on our wedding day all the way back in 1955 to fiercely protect what we built together. It was the visionary promise my great-grandfather made back in 1882 to invest deeply in community, not just in corporate profit. And it was the quiet promise I had made to myself to age with my dignity, awareness, and autonomy fully intact. I carefully placed Nora's photograph back on the wooden mantelpiece right beside the framed harbor share certificates, two entirely different kinds of inheritance, but both completely priceless. Outside the window, Clara and Sam's joyful laughter drifted up from the front porch where they had all gathered together to watch the beautiful sunset. Grant's patrol car slowly pulled up to the curb. He was joining us for dinner. I smiled warmly. This was exactly what winning looked like. 6 months after the intense and final basement showdown, I stood peacefully at the exact same harbor view window where this grueling ordeal had first commenced. Holding a warm cup of coffee in my weathered hands, I realized I was 68 years old, and for the first time in a very long time, completely at peace. The bright January light broke cold, crisp, and clear over the vast expanse of Charleston Harbor. The undulating water below beautifully reflected deep shades of pewter and gold. These were the very same colors I had anxiously watched from this exact vantage spot on that humid July morning, when Evelyn had first coldly demanded that I pack up my life and move into the damp storage room. It was the same window and the same stunning view, but a completely different transformed man was now looking through it. My quiet townhouse smelled delightfully of fresh coffee and citrusy lemon polish. Up the stairs, the tidy guest room held Lily's weekend bag. She chose to stay over with me twice a month now, openly preferring my quiet, structured home to her mother's increasingly chaotic apartment. Downstairs, the extensive basement archive remained impeccably organized, though I honestly hadn't opened those heavy evidence containers since everything wrapped up in November. The historic harbor share certificates now sat proudly framed right on the wooden mantelpiece beside Nora's cherished photograph. They were twin inheritances that had quite literally saved my life. Suddenly, a familiar, cheerful knock echoed at the front door. Sam let himself inside just as he routinely did most mornings before our scheduled work shift began. "Morning, Harold," he called out warmly from the hallway. "Lily wanted to show you her latest report card. She got straight A's honor roll." Lily eagerly bounded into the clean kitchen, looking 16 and truly thriving in ways I simply hadn't seen 6 months ago. Her resilient mother had full custody of her now. Preston had been granted limited visitation rights, but rarely ever used them, being far too busy with his superficial new life to bother with the brave daughter who had boldly testified against his corrupt schemes. Lily came through this doorway right behind Sam, looking far more grounded than the frightened, fragile girl I had first encountered in my basement. 6 months of genuine stability had done what no manipulative scheme could ever undo. It had successfully given her back her emotional footing. "Grandfather Harold," she said excitedly, holding up a beautifully printed certificate. "I got into the advanced writing program at school. They said my personal essay about truth and documentation was the strongest submission they received." "Nora would have absolutely loved that," I said, feeling a familiar lump form in my throat. "I actually wrote about the old photograph," Lily said quietly, her eyes softening. "The one down in your basement, about how I desperately asked you who was lying and you looked at me and said documents don't lie." Sam grinned broadly, patting her shoulder. "Future lawyer right there." I laughed genuinely, freely, and loudly. Let's hope she uses it much better than the last lawyers in this family. I laughed again, realizing it was something I had completely forgotten how to do during those incredibly dark, terrifying September weeks. "Fair enough, sweetheart. But I am profoundly proud of you, regardless of what career you choose." Clara arrived 20 minutes later, visibly glowing in a radiant way I had never seen before. She enthusiastically held out her left hand before she even uttered a single hello. "I wanted you to hear it first, Harold," Clara said, her voice trembling with pure joy. "Michael proposed to me last night. I said yes." The diamond sitting on her finger was modest but genuine, much like Clara herself. Michael Donnelly, a dedicated high school English teacher she had met through her community volunteer work, had been courting her properly and respectfully for 3 months. He was patient, kind, gainfully employed, and had absolutely no interest in her house beyond genuinely wanting to share a beautiful life with her. "Does he truly know what he's getting into?" I asked, smiling warmly at her. "I told him absolutely everything," Clara said earnestly. "About the toxic ex who tried to steal my hard-earned inheritance, about watching you courageously fight for your life, about finally learning that I could say no." She paused, a proud smile touching her lips. "He said he loved me even more for having firm boundaries." "That's exactly how you know he's the right one," I said softly. We all happily sat around the sturdy kitchen table, me, Sam, Clara, and Lily happily drinking hot coffee and eating the fresh cinnamon rolls Clara had thoughtfully brought over. This was the exact same wooden table where Marjorie had once aggressively spread out fraudulent guardianship papers, where Evelyn had angrily slammed fake medical bills, where expensive lawyers had threatened my sanity, and where desperate allies had plotted defense strategies. Now it peacefully held breakfast, shared laughter, and exciting plans for Clara's upcoming wedding. "I heard something recently," Clara said carefully, watching my facial expression closely. "About Evelyn." I slowly set down my ceramic coffee cup, bracing myself slightly. "I'm listening." "She's living in Atlanta now, working a basic retail job at some mid-tier department store. Preston filed for a swift divorce the very day after the marriage annulment fell through. It turns out you cannot easily annul a marriage just because your scheming wife lied about being pregnant. Clara glanced briefly at the others before continuing. He remarried within 6 months, someone with an actual massive trust fund this time around. And what about Marjorie? I asked quietly. Completely disowned Evelyn, Clara revealed. Wouldn't even take her desperate phone calls. Last I heard, Marjorie's under severe investigation by the state licensing board. She might actually lose her real estate license permanently. I waited patiently for a grand surge of triumph to arrive within me. I waited for satisfaction, vindication, or the supposedly sweet taste of revenge. Instead, I felt only a quiet, gentle closure, like finishing a heavy book you are glad you read, but have absolutely no desire to ever reopen. I don't feel any triumph, I admitted openly to the table. I feel closure. They ultimately chose greed. I chose dignity. Some people inherit material wealth, Sam said, looking at me with deep respect. Others inherit character. Only one of those truly lasts. Protecting what matters in this life isn't about building high walls and buying heavy locks. It's entirely about knowing which doors to firmly close and which doors to keep wide open. I had firmly closed the door on Evelyn Marjorie Preston and everyone else who had maliciously tried to exploit my profound grief and crushing loneliness. But I had opened doors to Sam, Clara, Lily, Grant, Hale, and everyone who had shown up simply because they valued me as a human being, not because they valued my estate. After they all left for the townhouse for work and school, I stood at the harbor window once again. It was the same panoramic view that had witnessed my darkest fears and my brightest victories. I gently touched the historic harbor share certificates sitting on the mantelpiece, not because of their massive $500,000 financial value, but because they represented keeping sacred promises to the dead. Nora had fully trusted me to protect what we had spent a lifetime building, and I had done it. That chaotic July morning felt like a completely different lifetime ago. Evelyn calling me at the break of dawn, demanding I move immediately to the storage room, her voice dripping with false, sickening concern. I easily could have surrendered back then. I could have signed those predatory papers, accepted that forced guardianship, and let them quietly ship me off to a memory care facility while they happily liquidated everything Nora and I had worked 68 long years to build. Instead, I chose to fight. 40 years of washing windows had taught me a valuable lesson. Some falls you survive simply by knowing exactly when to hold tight. When Evelyn pushed hard, I held tight. When Marjorie threatened me, I held tight. When Preston produced fake medical letters and smooth-talking nursing home directors offered empty reassurances, I held tight to the absolute truth. The estate was still entirely mine, all $2.3 million of it, plus the reliable $18,000 in annual dividends, plus the lucrative partnership with Sam that was currently projected to completely triple our harbor investments within the next 5 years. But much more than that, my dignity was mine. My autonomy was mine. My home was mine. I picked up my professional window washing equipment. Sam was waiting patiently in the truck outside, ready for our big downtown high-rise job. 68 years old, worth far more money than I had ever dreamed of possessing, and still actively choosing honest hard work 40 stories up in the air because it kept me clear-headed, grounded, and immensely grateful. Nora's beautiful photograph smiled at me from the mantel. I smiled right back at her. "We did it, love," I whispered into the quiet room. "We protected our home. We chose real family. We kept every single promise that mattered." Outside, the vast harbor beautifully reflected the bright morning sun, solid and enduring as the legacy we had built together. Inside, my heart was completely full with people who had truly earned their place there, not through blood or marriage, but through unwavering loyalty, genuine love, and showing up when it mattered most. They often say you can't choose your family, but I learned that you can absolutely choose who gets the keys to your heart and who stays locked outside forever. And to you listening to my story, remember this: looking back, I made mistakes. I hope you never have to make. I let grief and loneliness override my common sense. I wanted family so badly after Nora passed that I ignored the warning signs. Don't make my mistake of trusting without verifying. Don't let anyone use your vulnerability as a weapon. And most importantly, don't wait until you're cornered to fight back. The lesson I learned is this family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when things get hard, who fights beside you instead of against you. As a dad and father figure to my chosen family, now I've discovered that real revenge isn't about destroying those who wronged you. It's about protecting what they tried to steal and building something they can never touch. I believe God put me through this trial to teach me that wisdom and community are stronger than any scheme. Sometimes the best family revenge is simply refusing to let betrayal win. What do you think about my story? Have you ever had to stand up to someone trying to take advantage of you or your family? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're not already subscribed to Dad's Calm Revenge, I hope you'll join our community. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know that you took the time to hear my story. One final note: while some details have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, the core lesson about protecting your dignity, choosing your family wisely, and standing up for what's right is as real as it gets. Take care of yourself.